You have bad handwriting. Right?
Well, Mom is a liar.
I think she says that.
Aliens Ate My Homework by Bruce Coville and illustrated by Catherine Coville.
Who's Catherine Coville? Part of his family?
Yep. Maybe a
wife?
wife?
Yeah, wife.
Maybe a daughter?
Yeah, I was about to say daughter.
I don't know.
But I was trying to say wife. I forgot what.
Okay.
Girl is.
Chapter 1. Billy Becker, Boy Beast.
Huh? Billy Becker, Boy Beast?
Yeah.
That's a weird chapter.
Okay. Watch out, Pudge Boy! Here comes number 23. That was Billy Becker. Splat! Squish! That was Arnie Markle, providing sound effects for the final moments of the bug Billy was smushing against the back of my head. Gurgle! That was me, Rod Albright, trying to say, "Let me go!" which wasn't easy with Arnie sitting on my back and pressing my face into the grass. Why was Billy Becker squishing a bug against the back of my head? It was his hobby. You know how it is. Some people collect stamps or comic books or beer bottle caps.
That's you, Dad!
Billy was collecting a list of how many kinds of bugs he could smash in my hair. Why was Arnie helping him? Well, until Billy moved to town. Arnie had been our official class bully and kid most likely to spend time in prison. Then Billy got there, and within a month he had made it a point to beat up every boy in the 6th grade. What made this remarkable was that he was the smallest kid in the class, at least 6 inches shorter than most of us. My mother, who sort of dripped sympathy, said she thought Billy was acting so tough to make up for his size. Whatever the reason for Billy's bullying, most of the guys just stayed away from him after that first month. The only exception was Arnie, who was at least 6 inches taller than most of us and had been so awed by Billy's fighting skills that he became devoted to him. Now he was Billy's official hench thug. This meant, among other things, that it was his job to hold me down while Billy smeared bugs in my hair. "Okay, Arnie," said Billy. "You can let him up now." I scrambled to my feet, but didn't say anything. I had already learned what a mistake that could be. Arnie, unfortunately, was perfectly willing to talk. "I don't think that one should count," he said. "Why not?" demanded Billy. "It was a spider. Spiders aren't bugs." Billy slapped his hand against his forehead. "How could I have been so stupid? I'm sorry, Pudge Boy. Really, I'll tell you what. Just scratch that one off the list, and don't worry about it. I'll find something nice and juicy to replace it." Snickering at their wit, Billy and Arnie wandered off. My best friend Mickey helped me to my feet. Here's a picture.
What? Yay, there's pictures. Agreed. I'm so mad Goosebumps don't have pictures.
Yeah, but they have really cool covers, though.
First 12 books
Mickey
since pictures?
Mickey had been the shortest kid in the 6th grade until Billy showed up. He was still one of the nicest, which shows you what my mother's theory was worth. "I'm amazed," he said now. "Why?" I asked as I dug for my comb. I never used to carry a comb, but after Billy started his new hobby, I found it very useful for getting the bug guts out of my hair. Mickey shrugged. That was the most intelligent thing Arnie said all year. You might wonder why I didn't just pound Billy's face when he did these things, especially since he was so much smaller than me. The answer is simple. While Billy had already beaten up every boy, and half the girls in the class, I, personally, had never managed to beat up anyone. The sad truth is, I'm not much good at anything physical. That's why the other kids call me Rod the Clod. Except Billy, of course. He calls me Pudge Boy, which I don't think is really fair, since the doctor says I only need to lose 10 or 15 pounds to be the right weight.
What's Pudge?
Pudge is like fat. The few times I lost my temper and actually struck back at Billy, he either put on his innocent face, which teachers and other adults seemed to find totally angelic, or else he beat the daylights out of me. I know I'm not a good fighter. Even so, it is very embarrassing to get beat up by someone a foot shorter than I am. I was still trying to think of a way to get revenge on Billy when the afternoon bus dropped Mickey and me in the front of our houses. We live about 4 miles out of town, and there are not a lot of other kids around, except for our stupid siblings. As our teacher, Miss Melanie, Miss Maloney calls them. Mickey has one sibling and I have two. Mickey's is a little sister named Marky. She is pretty much a normal kid. Mine are a match set. 3-year-old twins known as Little Thing 1 and Little Thing 2. They are not normal by any stretch of the imagination. Their real names are Linda and Eric. They decided they wanted to be Little Thing 1 and Little Thing 2 after I read The Cat in the Hat to them. They had a fight about who got to be Thing 1, but since Linda was born first, Eric was doomed to lose that battle. He loses a lot of fights that way. My mother is totally unamused by these names, but she can't do much about them because A, they were the Thing's idea, and B, the Things are only 3 years old. In case you don't happen to have any around, let me explain that 3-year-olds are very good at insisting on this kind of thing. My dog, Bonehead, started barking as I came up the driveway. "Hello, Rod. Pick up your feet," said Mom as I stumbled over the doorstep. "I'm glad you're here. Miss Nesbit needs help, and I don't want to take Eric and Linda over there if I don't have to." "My name isn't Eric," said Eric without looking up from his blue finger paint he was smearing across a big piece of paper. "It's Little Thing 2, and I like Mrs. Nesbit. She gives me cookies." Mrs. Nesbit is this old lady who goes to our church. Mom sort of watches out for her, which takes a lot of time. Once I asked Mom why she did it. She just looked at me funny and said, "It needs to be done." I wouldn't have cared all that much, except watching out for Mrs. Nesbit didn't just mean extra work for Mom. I mean, who do you think got stuck with Thing 1 and Thing 2 while Mom was off playing Good Samaritan? "Can't you take them with you?" I asked. "I have to work on my volcano." The twins make Mrs. Nesbit nervous. "They make me nervous too," I said. I started breathing fast and wheezing to prove it. Mom gave me one of her looks. You know the kind I mean. "All right," I muttered. "I'll do it." Like I had a choice. I decided to let the things help me with the volcano, or at least with making the papier-mâché I needed for the next step. A volcano was my project for the big end-of-the-year science fair, which was scheduled for that Friday. I had been working on it for over a week now, and it was going to be big time. A great-looking volcano that would really erupt when it was finished. I needed to add one more layer of papier-mâché before I could start painting it. "Hey, kids!" I yelled as Mom headed out the driveway. "Want to make pooper mucky?" "Pooper mucky? Is that the things called papier-mâché?" "Yay for Roddy!" cried Little Thing 1, who loved gooping around with the stuff. Little Thing 2 started to clap. "Okay, you two get the tub. I'll meet you in my room." It was one of those hot days that sometimes surprise you in early May. So I opened my windows and put on a pair of shorts. After spreading some paper on the floor to protect it from the goop we were about to make, I went to look at the volcano, which stood on the card table in the corner of the room. It was nearly 2.5 feet high, built on a 4-foot by 4-foot square of plywood I had found in the basement. I was really proud of it. The things lugged in the tub we used for making papier-mâché, and we dumped in some torn-up paper left from the last time we had done this.
Did you try to make a machete?
No, papier-mâché.
What's that?
It's when you get like pieces of newspaper wet with some like glue mixture, and then it dries and becomes hard, and so you can make shapes of things with it. And so he's making the shape of a volcano.
You've done this in our thing, right? Dad, don't you use like
a lot of times you use like
compressor?
I don't know. A lot of times you use like a balloon. You blow up a balloon and then you wrap the paper mache around it, and then you can pop and take the balloon out, and then you still have the shape of the balloon from the paper mache. Anyway, then I poured in water and paste, and we started squeezing it with our hands to get that nice oozy goop that is so much fun to work with. When it was pretty much ready, I went back to the volcano to see where I wanted to start working. Suddenly, I heard a tearing sound. Before I could turn to see what had caused it, a dollop of papier-mâché smacked against the back of my bare legs. "Wow!" cried Little Thing 1. "Holy macaroni!" cried Little Thing 2. I spun around. The first thing I saw was a big hole in the window screen. The next thing I saw was globs of papier-mâché splattered all over the room, including a big splotch on Thing 1's face. The third thing I saw was a round spaceship, about a foot across, that had landed in my vat of papier-mâché. I thought it must be a toy until a blue glow began to crackle and sizzle around it. You could smell the electricity. I revised my opinion. This thing was real. The crackle continued. Just as I was wondering if the ship was going to explode, it started to grow. Within seconds, it was 3 feet long. I wondered if it was going to get so big that it would blow our house to smithereens. But suddenly, the crackling electricity glow began to sputter. The ship shrank back to 2 feet, grew a bit, then shrank again. A moment later, the crackling stopped. The electric glow disappeared. The spaceship held steady about 2 feet. Thing 1 and Thing 2 had been edging closer to me while all this was going on. Now I had one of them clinging to each hand. We waited, holding our breath. Everything was silent. We stepped forward, then stopped as a door opened in the side of the ship. Chapter 2. Gracker. Part of my brain was screaming, "Run, you fool, run!" Part of my brain was going, "This is the coolest thing that will ever happen to you in your entire life." My body, ignoring both parts of my brain, just shook. A long ramp began to extend from the door of the ship. It stretched to the edge of the papier-mâché tub, then stopped. A moment later, a tiny green alien, 2 inches tall at most, stepped onto the ramp. He had a body like Arnold Schwarzenegger and a face like a shaved gorilla. Little nubs, like a baby horn, sprouted from his high forehead. His suit was brick red with gold trim at the neck and shoulders. My first impulse was to pick him up. I think this was because he looked so much like the toys I had been playing with since I was the Thing's age. Stepping forward, I reached out for him. All right, that was stupid, but I was feeling pretty addled at the moment. It didn't do anything to unaddle me when the alien pulled out a ray gun, pointed it at my head, and said, "One more move and I'll ventilize your skull." Was this a sign that they hadn't come in peace? Or was it merely an indication of how stupid I had just been? It didn't matter. Raising my hands, I began to back away from the alien. After 2 steps, I tripped and landed on my butt. "Who are you?" I asked from my new position on the floor. "My name is Gracker," said the little green guy. "I am the commander of this mission." "What mission?" "My crew and I are agents of the Galactic Patrol. We have been sent to this miserable backwater planet to capture a notorious criminal known and feared across the stars. Unfortunately," and here he looked down at the vat of papier-mâché, "we seem to have encountered some difficulties. We will need your help. Therefore, I am making you a deputy." "I beg your pardon?" "Refused," said Gracker. "Provision 13.4.7.6 of the Galactic Legal Code gives me the right to deputize natives of underdeveloped planets in cases of emergency. If you resist, you may find yourself under arrest and heading for a trial on Alpha Centauri, unless you want to spend the rest of your miserable little life pounding rocks on an asteroid. I would suggest you do as I say." The guy was only 2 inches tall, but as long as he was holding that ray gun, he was as much of a bully as Billy Becker. "I don't like him, Roddy," said Little Thing 2. "Make him go away." "Silence, larva!" snapped Gracker. "Is he a Who?" asked Little Thing 1. I had read them Horton Hears a Who the night before. "Tell them to be silent," ordered Gracker, pointing his ray gun in the general direction right between my eyes. "Can it, kids," I said softly. "I have to talk to the man." "I want to play with him," the Little Thing 1, stretching her pudgy, paste-covered hands toward Gracker. "Back, larva!" cried Gracker. He pulled the trigger on the ray gun. It made a tiny whining sound. A red light, no bigger around than one of those leads you use in the automatic pencil, hit the edge of the papier-mâché tub. After drilling a perfect tiny hole right through the metal, it went onto the floor. It wasn't as easy to see, but I figured it was making a perfect tiny hole there as well. The hole really was tiny. But even a tiny hole that went all the way through your head could cause a lot of problems, like death. "Linda, get back," I snapped.
Really?
"Yeah." Thing 1's lower lip began to tremble, and a big tear rolled down her cheek. "I want to play with him, Roddy," she whimpered, even as she backed up. "Now see what you've done," I said to Gracker. Before he could answer, another alien came scuttling out of the ship. This one had yellow skin. At least, what I could see of it was yellow. Most of the new alien was covered by a sleeveless, high-collared robe that hung from its neck to its feet. The robe itself was blue, but I couldn't make out the exact shade because it kept shifting. Under the robe, which was open, was a long-sleeved tunic. The alien itself had a high bald head with big brow ridges, though not as big as Gracker's,
Dad,
a broad flat nose, and huge pointed ears.
do you ever eat breakfast?
Not usually. Gracker! Gracker! It sighed. I knew you should have let me come out first. You're going to create a mess if you're not careful. At least let me change modules for you. Something about the way this alien talked gave me my first hint that it was a female. While Gracker muttered and grumbled, she reached a four-fingered hand up to the back of the head and pulled out something that would have been about the size of a very short pencil. If the aliens had been our size, after fumbling in her pocket for a moment, she produced another object, about the same size, and jammed it into the back of Gracker's skull. There they are.
Oh.
And so here are those two aliens right there. There's Gracker,
Ew.
and that's the one that just showed up right there.
We found this ball laying outside.
Okay, that needs to go in the trash. Immediately, he seemed to relax. Diplomatic module, said the second alien, looking at me and smiling. Allow me to introduce myself, as I should have from the beginning. The last half of this sentence, spoken sharply, was directed more at Gracker than at me. Gracker wrinkled his turned-up nose at her. My name is Madame Pong, said the second alien, turning back to me. I am diplomatic officer for the good ship Ferkel. I suppose you want me to take you to our leader, I asked. Gracious, no, she cried, her voice filled with horror. We have no interest in establishing formal contact with your planet at this point. Why not? I asked, wondering if I should be offended on behalf of all mankind. The time is not ripe, she said with a smile. Now, while Gracker is correct that he can insist on your help, had it been I speaking, I would simply have requested it, as I will now. Would you help us, please? What do you want me to do? Simply remove our ship from this mess, and take us someplace where we can enlarge it without destroying anything. How big is it going to get? I asked nervously. Considerably bigger than this room, snapped Gracker. Considerably bigger than this room, snapped Gracker, before Madame Pong could answer. Were you trying to enlarge it a minute ago? I yelped, shuddering at the thought of what might have happened if they had succeeded. Madame Pong's skin turned orange. We were not aware that we had landed inside a dwelling. We are having some technical problems. She glanced down at the papier-mâché. My guess is that our sensing equipment has been clogged by this strange swamp. But you could have killed us! We didn't, said Gracker, as if that made it all better. But you could have. Will you take us outside, please? Asked Madame Pong, folding her hands in front of her and making a little bow. Remember, we do need to enlarge our ship. It is in your best interest that we do so outdoors. When she put it that way, I didn't have much choice. I'll have to bring the things, I said. Madame Pong looked puzzled, so I gestured to the twins. Perhaps my language program is defective, she said. I did not think this culture referred to children as things. It's a long story. I'll tell you about it later, if you really want to know. I turned and headed for the door. I'll be right back. I have to leave a note for my mother. A beam of red light shot past my head and burned a tiny pit in the doorframe. Hey! I cried, spinning around. I'm sorry, but you cannot leave this room unless I accompany you, said Gracker quietly. I was surprised to hear him speak so politely, until I remembered the diplomatic module. Madame Pong had jammed into the back of his head. Why not? Security. For all I know, you're heading off to contact your government. They wouldn't listen. Nonetheless, I must accompany you. I looked at Madame Pong. She nodded and said, It is necessary. How do you want to do this? I asked, remembering Gracker's reaction to the last time I had reached for him. I'll ride on your shoulder. Before I looked and asked if he wanted me to pick him up, he flew from the ramp of the ship to my shoulder. "Rocket pack," he said when he saw the surprised look on my face, settling to a sitting position on my shoulder. He pointed his ray gun at my head and added, "Don't try any funny stuff." I nodded and headed for the kitchen. It took me a few minutes to find paper and pencil, but finally I left a note telling my mother I had taken the twins for a walk. The delay made Gracker impatient, and he was muttering angrily as we started back toward my room. I thought maybe a little conversation would help calm him down, so I said, "Just how tall will you be when you get back to your normal size?" "That is classified information," he replied fiercely. I started to get mad. Then I thought, if he wants to be that way, let him. I shrugged, telling myself to ignore his rudeness. Shouting with rage, Gracker scrambled up my collar. Grabbing the edge of my ear with one tiny hand, he poked his ray gun into my skin and shouted, "Freeze or fry, traitor!"
Practice.
Chapter 3. Seldom Seen.
Where are we at?
Remember the Gracker,
Gracker.
aimed his gun at the boy and said, "Freeze or fry, traitor."
Yeah. Why do you say traitor?
We don't know.
What? Freeze or fry me?
Fry, like he's gonna zap him with the gun and fry him.
Or he's freeze gonna turn into a fry?
Yeah.
Man, I
Okay,
wonder what
so
the new potatoes
I'm
taste
going to read now. I froze. I mean, wouldn't you? "What is it?" I asked, trying to speak without moving my jaw. "What did I do?" I sounded like a bad ventriloquist, but I didn't want to give Gracker any excuse to fire that ray gun. "You tried to throw me to the ground," he said, sounding offended. "Fortunately, the trained reflexes of a frisking fighter are more than a match for such an obvious move." I started to ask what he meant, then realized my mistake. I suppose it should have been obvious. Never shrug while carrying a trigger-happy paranoid alien on your shoulder. Maybe they should add that to those survival rules your parents teach you when you're a little kid. Now remember, Rod, don't eat soap. Look both ways before you cross the street, and never annoy a temperamental alien. "Can I talk?" I asked in my bad ventriloquist voice. Softly. "I wasn't trying to throw you off. I was shrugging. It's something we Earthlings do." "Do you expect me to believe that?" "Why don't you ask Madame Pong?" I said. "Isn't she supposed to know that kind of thing?" Gracker thought for a second, then said, "All right, we'll ask Madame Pong, but move slowly." "Look," I said, as I walked slowly back to the room, "I'm not your enemy. I don't like the way you're treating me, but I'm not out to get you or anything." "Just return to the room," said Gracker. I hoped when we got back to the room, we wouldn't find the things playing catch with the spaceship. If we did, I figured I could kiss my brain goodbye. Fortunately, Madame Pong had the situation well under control. The twins were sitting side by side, staring at her with fascination as she told them something I took to be a fairy tale from her planet. I expected Gracker to interrupt. To my surprise, he told me to be silent until she was done. Before I could figure out what was exactly happening in the story, Madame Pong said, "And that is how the Snavel and the Wonkus came to live happily ever after."
The Snavel and the Wonkus.
The Snavel and the Wonkus.
Is that an actual fairy tale?
No, it's something from her planet.
It's funny because it's like Willy Wonka.
Then she made one of her tiny bows. The things began to clap. "Tell it again," demanded Thing 1. "I'm sorry," said Madame Pong, "but like the Wonkus, I have work to do. Are you ready?" she asked, turning to Gracker and me. I started to nod, but thought better of it. "Yes," I said. "Did you know that if you have your lips apart, you can say 'yes' without moving anything except your throat?"
Mm-hmm.
We left through the back door. I had Madame Pong in my front pocket, the starship under my arm, and the things and Bonehead bouncing along behind me. Gracker was still on my shoulder, pointing the ray gun at my head, despite the fact that I had assured him at least 3 times that I didn't have any intention of harming the ship. "I am responsible for the safety of the Furkle," he had replied each time. Without without meaning offense to you, I must do my job. After the third time, I had started to shrug, but managed to stop myself. Once we were outside, it took a few minutes to decide where to go. After all, when the ship expanded to full size, it was not going to be easy to hide. Fortunately, I had a lot of places to choose from. The land where my parents had built our house used to be part of Grandpa's farm. The house sits on a hill that slopes down to a swamp. On the far side of the swamp lies a big field surrounded by woods. Grandpa calls the field Seldom Seen. He gave it
That's the name of the chapter.
He gave it this name because the only way you can get to it is by going across the swamp, which you can only do on foot, or by making your way over half a mile of bumpy dirt road that cuts through a neighbor's automobile junkyard. Seldom Seen is the only part of our land Grandpa still uses. Every spring he plants it with oats or corn. About the only people who ever go back there are my family, a few hired hands, and in the fall, some hunters. I love Seldom Seen and the woods that surround it, but I think the swamp is my favorite place because it's so odd, even spooky, with its murky pools and huge old willow trees. To cross the swamp, you start in this chunk of land that is usually dry, though it gets pretty squishy in the spring and the fall, sometimes actually ending up completely underwater. Then,
Sounds like what is it called? The Goosebump book.
Werewolf of Sweet Fever Swamp. Yeah.
It's always squishy.
Then you use this weird little bridge my father and some of his friends built. Back when Dad was still around. The bridge is about 6 feet wide and 20 feet long. It has no side rails and is only about 3 feet above the water. Beneath it flows a stream, the only running water in the swamp. The bridge is a great place for lying on your belly and watching what swims underneath, which is mostly nothing, though sometimes in the spring there will be a big fish. "A froggy!" cried Little Thing One as we started across the swamp. She loved frogs, and having spotted one, there was no way she was not going to chase it. "Stop her, Bonehead!" I cried suddenly, glad I had let him tag along. After all, I didn't dare chase Linda myself. Any sudden movement might make Gracker trigger happy. But if she got herself wet, I would be in big trouble with my mother. Bonehead got her back into the group without much fuss. "I like this," said Gracker as we stepped. I like this," said Gracker as we stepped onto the bridge. "It looks like home." "Do you come from a swamp planet?" I asked, thinking of some old movies I had seen. "Do you come from a swamp planet?" he replied. I started to ask what he meant, but then I figured it out on my own. A planet is a big place, and it's pretty silly to think that it will be the same from one pole to another. That should have been obvious to me. Since in this little walk we were going from lawn to swamp to field and possibly to forest. I do not come from a swamp planet, said Gracker when I didn't answer. "But on my planet, I used to live in a swamp." His voice was wistful, as if he was really missing his swamp. "It was a lovely place," he continued, "boggy and smelly." "How nice," I said.
Ew. Why would it be smelly and he liked
"Don't
it?
get all soppy, Gracker," called Madame Pong from my pocket. "We have work to do." I realized to my surprise that Gracker was sniffling. "See any place big enough for the ship yet?" I asked, hauling Little Thing 2 away from the edge of the bridge. "Not yet," said Gracker. "Keep going." "So how is it that you two speak my language?" I asked. "Did they give you a crash course before you left?" I realized after I said that under the circumstances, crash course was a bad choice of words. "We have monitored your broadcast material for several decades now," said Madame Pong. Here's a picture of them. I'm walking with the ship under his arm over the bridge.
You better look. Just use that. It's a tiny look. Where's the other people?
Oh, one's on his shoulder and one's in his pocket.
They're so tiny. You see both? Little Thing 1 and Who's Bonehead?
Bonehead's a dog.
Oh. What, is this the first book that has pictures in like 8 books?
Oh, it's been a little while since we had a book with pictures, huh?
Or was it Funicula?
Oh, yeah, that one that you had of the Tales from Benicula. That was 2 books ago. It had pictures.
Oh, yeah. So it's been 2 books.
That
Are we counting this one?
Just there was Deep Trouble and then your book, the Benicula one. That material is run through a
And then Deep Trouble 2, and now this. So it's been 1 book, 2 books, basically. I don't know.
That material is run through a computer which analyzes your language. That analysis is used to prepare a language module, which you plug into a unit that has been surgically implanted in our brains. This module provides, within certain limitations, instant translation. If I take it out, and here she reached up and pulled something from behind her ear. Geckum speck bribble eep eep, she said, finishing the sentence with a couple of squeaks. She replaced the module and said, Simple, really. Elementary, I replied. I recognize that, said Madame Pong. You're quoting Sherlock Holmes. I like Sherlock Holmes. How do you know about him? I asked. I told you. We've been monitoring your broadcasts. So what do you think of what you've seen? I asked, wondering if they picked up things like Gilligan's Island and laxative commercials. You are a very troubled people, replied Madame Pong seriously. We feel bad for you. Before I could figure out what, if anything, to say to this, Gracker shouted as loud as he could, considering that he was only 2 inches high. There! That's the spot! We had left the swamp path and crossed the edge of Seldom Seen. Grandpa had been plowing last week. So what we saw as we came out from between the scrub trees was 8 acres of soft brown soil, surrounded on all sides by low-growing forest. Lots of room, no one to see it. It was indeed perfect for aliens' purpose. Walk on a bit, said Gracker. We need to set the ship farther from the trees before we enlarge it. I want to carry the spaceship, Roddy, said Thing 2. No, I want to carry it, whined Thing 1, who clearly had not had a bit of interest in carrying it until just this moment. I have to carry it, I said firmly before Gracker could jump into the battle. And that's that. Strange species, said Gracker, letting such undeveloped creatures walk around on their own. They're fun, I said, defending the twins in spite of myself. Strange species, repeated Gracker. Put the ship down here, please. Following his directions, I placed the ship carefully on the ground. Now what? I whispered. Now we blow it up, said Gracker, causing me to wonder if their language implants were as effective as they thought. Move back. I took the twins by the hands and walked back until Gracker said we were safe. After a moment, a blue crackling light surrounded the ship. Wowie! Cried Eric as the ship began to grow. It doubled in size, then doubled again, until it was nearly 10 feet across. Suddenly, the crackling light began to fizz. We heard a series of loud bangs, like a string of firecrackers going off, followed by a whining sound as the ship shrank back to its 2-foot size. Buggers, said Gracker, which made me wonder again about this language module. Should we go over to it? I asked nervously. Not yet, he said. Let me talk to the people inside. I was about to ask how he was going to do that when I realized he probably had some sort of radio equipment. I also had wondered just how many aliens there were inside the ship. 2? A dozen? 100? This was starting to feel like a genuine invasion. He pressed a button on his collar and began to mutter. After a while he stopped and bent his head as if listening. Mutter, mutter, listen, listen. Finally he pressed the button again, then turned to me and said, We'll have to go back to your room. Something is wrong with the enlarging device, and we have to repair it. It looks as if we're going to be your guests for a while. What Gracker means, said Madame Pong, is we would appreciate it if you would extend us your hospitality until we are able to repair our ship." "What I mean," said Gracker, "is that he takes us back to his house and finds a safe place for us, or I arrest him for obstructing interplanetary justice." I think I'm going to have to stop there. Chapter 4, in which I become an interstellar criminal. Mom was back from taking care of Mrs. Nesbit, and she was not amused. Again. "Rod, you know I don't like you going off this close to supper time," she said as I followed the twins and Bonehead through the door. "Where have you been?" "We went back to Seldom Seen for a few minutes." "With the aliens," added Thing One happily. Mom raised an eyebrow. "New game?" "Sort of. The things like it better than I do," she smiled. "Well, I wish you hadn't gone out there right now, but I do appreciate your playing with them, Rod." I felt pretty guilty until I realized that even though I hadn't really been playing with the twins, if it hadn't been for me, the two of them might have tried playing with the ship, in which case Gracker might have melted them, or something. So I had probably saved their lives. "Where did you get that spaceship anyway?" asked Mom, noticing that what I was carrying. Since I can't lie, it's not easy for me to answer a question like this. I thought fast. "I'm taking care of it for a friend," I said at last, which was true, if I was willing to consider Gracker a friend. "Well, be careful of it. You know I don't like you borrowing toys." "I'll be very careful," I said sincerely. Then, to my relief, she shanghaied the twins and marched them off to get ready for supper.
For what?
Supper.
What's supper?
Like dinner, yeah. "I want to play with the aliens," wailed Eric as he disappeared into the bathroom. I hightailed it for my own room. Once we were inside, Gracker and Madame Pong climbed out of my shirt pocket and used their rocket belts to fly down to my desk. "Why is it so important to keep you a secret?" I asked. "Your planet has not yet been approved for entry into the League of Worlds," said Madame Pong, putting her hands together and making a little bow. "Probably never will be," added Gracker. Madame Pong reached behind Gracker and gave him a solid whack in the base of the skull. "Please forgive the captain," she said. "I fear that the diplomatic module I provided for him is not fully functional." "But is what he said true? They won't let us into the League of Worlds?" I felt like I was being told about a club that I couldn't join. "Let's just say that the matter is under discussion," said Madame Pong smoothly. "As for us staying secret," added Gracker, "let me explain it this way. I'm now giving you a direct order not to tell people about us. If you do not obey, you will be in violation of Galactic Ordinance 143.5.7.6. The penalty... That's the period at the end of the sentence, Dean. "The penalties can be severe." "I'm just a kid. Why are you threatening me?" "I'm not threatening," said Gracker. "I'm explaining. Madame Pong does not always understand the difference," he added as the diplomatic officer began to object. Just then the phone rang. "Rod!" called my mother after a second. "It's Mickey. He wants to talk to you." I looked at Gracker. Would he let me answer the phone, or was I being held prisoner in my own room? "Better answer it," said Madame Pong without giving Gracker a chance to forbid me. I went out into the hall, which meant that I could talk without the aliens hearing me. "Hey, Rod," said Mickey. "Is it okay if I come over? It might be better if I came over to your place." "How come?" "This isn't a good time." That was all Mickey needed to know. Sometimes it wasn't a good time at my house. Sometimes it wasn't a good time at his house. He knew I'd fill him in later if I wanted to. "I'll check with my mom," he said. While Mickey was checking with his mom, I checked with mine. "Not until after supper," she said, which was pretty much what I expected. I thought about checking with Gracker too, but decided against it. I wasn't going to let him run my life any more than I had to. I would just lock the twins out of the room so they couldn't cause any trouble, and leave the aliens to fix their ship. You might wonder why I was going over to Mickey's instead of staying to talk to the aliens. The answer was simple. If I didn't tell someone about this, I thought I would explode. Supper was Mom's famous tuna noodle casserole, which I actually like.
What's a casserole?
I guess it's like a casserole but made of noodles? I don't know. Which I actually like. Strange as that might sound. Even so, I ate it as quickly as I could without getting yelled at. When I was done eating, I went to my room and locked it from the outside. Mom had bought me a lock after the third time the twins had playtime in my room while I was at school. I didn't tell the aliens where I was going. As I went across the road to Mickey's house, I began to wonder if not telling the aliens was a mistake. But I knew that Gracker would simply have ordered me to stay home. Mickey was waiting for me up in his room. I couldn't wait to get up there and tell him what had happened. But when I did, he didn't believe me. I suppose that made sense. Who would? Besides, at the end of the 3rd grade, we had started this game where he had a bunch of little alien friends. We used to sit outside at night and describe what they were doing in the sky above us. It was a lot of fun, but we had sort of stopped doing it last year. Now Mickey thought I was just trying to start a new version of it. "I'm serious, Mick," I said, almost desperate. "I've got a tiny spaceship and at least 2 aliens in my room." "Okay, then why don't you let me come over and see them? I think they might kill me if I did." I thought about that for a second after I said it. Would Gracker really kill me? Probably not. But I did think he was serious about taking me off to stand trial. I had a feeling he didn't believe in juvenile offender status. Mickey started to laugh. "Come on, Mickey. You know I never lie to you." "I know I never catch you," said Mickey, who loved to make up outrageous stories and see if he could get me to believe them. Once we were digging behind his house. We weren't digging for anything special, just digging, to see how big a hole we could make. Anyway, we found this little blue bottle, and Mickey told me that it was a magic, and if I put water in it every day, eventually these famous people would come out of it. This is probably the single stupidest thing I have ever believed, and I'm not going to tell you how old I was when it happened, because it is embarrassing. Let's just say that I was a lot younger than I am now, but also old enough that I should have known better. I think one reason I believed him was that since I can't lie, it is always hard for me to realize when someone else is lying to me. "Look," I said, "I just became an interplanetary criminal by telling you this. I'm risking my life to let you in on this, and all you can do is make fun of me." By this time, Mickey was laughing so hard he fell off his bed. "Stop it, Rod," he gasped. "Please, I can't take any more." You know how it is when people get laughing so hard they can't stop. That's the way it was with Mickey. The more I tried to convince him that what I was saying was true, the more hilarious he thought it was. Finally, his mother came up and sent me home because we were keeping his little sister awake. It was dark outside and a cold wind blowing through the trees. It made me think of my father because the last time I had seen him was on a night like this. I wondered where he was now. When I got home, I had to go in and bop the things good night. They always want me to kiss them, which I do not want to do. So we have settled on a good night bop, which I do softly with their teddy bears, Violet and Arnold. There they are. There's Rod bopping them with the bears. Next, I kissed my mother goodnight. I had tried to work out a bopping deal with her.
How old is Rod?
But she still insists on a kiss. I think it's like 12.
He looks like a grown man.
I don't remember. Finally, I went to my room where
Doesn't
I figured...
Doesn't he look like...
I don't think he looks like an old man.
Maybe 16?
Finally, I went to my room where I figured I would have a long talk with the aliens. Now that I was used to the idea of what was going on, I was actually looking forward to this talk. I wanted to find out more about them and where they came from. That was before I walked through the door and discovered the disaster they had created. Then, I wanted to kill them. Chapter 5. Aliens ate my homework. "My volcano!" I cried in dismay. "What have you done to my volcano?" Actually, I didn't need to ask. I could see for myself. They had carved a huge pit in the front of it. I knew the aliens had done it, because Gracker was using his ray gun to slice out another chunk even as I watched. There were 5 of them now. Gracker, Madame Pong, and 3 new ones, all of them on or near the volcano. When the piece Gracker was working on came free, He passed it behind him to one of the new guys, a purple-brown creature who looked a little like a lizard in a blue cape. This guy dumped it into a big metal box that had a spout on one end. He was chanting nonsense syllables to himself as he worked. Madame Pong stood above the pit, close to the top of the volcano, looking worried. Floating next to her was a potted plant that was slightly taller than she was. As near as I could tell, the plant was held up by little rockets mounted on the bottom of its pot. It had an enormous orange and yellow blossom, at least enormous for a plant, that was only a couple of inches tall. The blossom pointed slightly downward. A strange glow shone from behind the long petals. The fifth alien stood at the control panel of another metal box. It had a body that was shaped something like a lemon. From the body came 4 legs, 2 arms, and a neck that was even longer than the arms. At the end of that long neck was a head that made me think of a turtle with big eyes. This alien was using one hand to punch buttons on the control panel. In the other hand, it held a big chunk of my volcano. As I watched, it raised the chunk to its mouth and took a bite. It was eating my science project. "Stop!" I cried. "What do you think you're doing? I have commandeered this structure for use." "By the Galactic Patrol," said Gracker as he sliced off another chunk of the volcano. "We require some convertible mass for energy purposes, and this material was the most suitable we could find. The molecular structure seems already to have been reduced to a simple level, which saves us a great deal of trouble. Besides," added the bug-eyed turtle, taking another bite, "the taste is most excellent, and it has much to nourish a warrior." "I don't care if it's vitamin enriched. That's my science project. I have to take it to school in 2 days. Gracker narrowed his eyes. "Are you claiming your project is more important than interplanetary justice?" he asked. The lizard guy, the one who had been chanting, put his hands on Gracker's arm. "Careful, my captain," he whispered. Gracker shook his hand away. "Are you saying this project is more important than the capture of a deadly criminal?" At the moment, I felt exactly that way. However, I knew that yes was not the answer Gracker had in mind. "But my volcano," I stammered. "Rod, there are bigger things at stake here than your homework," said Madame Pong softly. "Right now, I would be happier if we were bigger," said the plant. I blinked. Did that thing just talk? No, it was the wind rustling through my leaves. "How do you do that?" I cried. "You don't even have a mouth." Can you stop making those noises, Gooberhead?
Okay.
I immediately wondered if that was true. Who knew what might be hidden in those petals? "Of course I don't have a mouth," said the plant. "Then how do you talk?" Pod burps. "I beg your pardon?" Uncurling one of its dozens of tendrils, the plant pulled aside a leaf. With another tendril, it pointed to a dark green pod hanging from one of its tendril stems. "I suck air into the pod, then use it to pump out sound." "Consider that a loose translation," added Madame Pong, a furrow wrinkling her yellow brow. "Burp is probably not the most precise word. However, your language has no closer analog for the process." "But it's a plant," I said, none too intelligently. "And you're meat," replied the plant. "Amazing that you can think at all, isn't it?" It paused, then waved several tendrils and added, "Or can you?" So here are these creatures. There's the one with the blue robe. There's the plant on the rockets that's talking.
That's Gracker, that's Madame Pong. Yeah. Yellow eyebrows.
Okay. I guess these are that's the lizard with the blue, and this is the turtle-like one.
Yeah.
Great. This alien plant not only talks, it's a wise guy. Where have you been anyway? Asked Gracker. "I don't recall giving you permission to leave the area." I had about had it. "You're not my boss," I snapped. "I am for the time being," said Gracker. Suddenly he narrowed his eyes, which meant that they nearly disappeared under that great beetling brow of his. Turning his ray gun from the volcano toward me, he said, "You didn't tell anyone about us, did you?" I've heard that things which happen early in your life can have a deep effect on you. I suppose that's why I can't lie. It happened when I was about 3, which was back when my dad still lived with us. Mom had made some of her special chocolate cookies. I loved these cookies. Well, actually, I never met a cookie I didn't like, which is one reason I'm pudgier than I would like to be. But these were Mom's specialty, and I loved them, despite the fact that they were kind of dry and could get stuck to the moisture at the top of your mouth quicker than a sponge. Anyway, I had asked if I could have one, and Mom had said no. I had decided I had wanted one anyway. Remember, I was only 3 years old. So I snuck into the kitchen, took a chair from the table, and used it to climb onto the counter. Then I crawled over the cookie jar, opened the top, and took out one of the chocolate treasures I had been longing for. Suddenly I heard my mother coming. I started to crawl back along the counter, not fast enough. She was going to enter the kitchen before I could get away. I would be caught chocolate-handed, so to speak. I did the only thing I could think of to get rid of the evidence. I crammed the entire cookie in my mouth. When my mother walked into the kitchen, she found me crawling along the counter, eyes wide, cheeks bulging. It didn't take Sherlock Holmes to see what I had been doing. "Rod," she asked softly, "do you have a cookie in your mouth?" Do you know what I did? I denied it. Right in front of her, with my mouth full of cookie, I said, "No." At least I tried to. But remember, these cookies were real saliva suckers. My mouth was drier than a 3-day-old peanut butter sandwich. When I tried to say, no, I didn't have a cookie in my mouth, what came out was a spray of chocolate crumbs and the words, Under the circumstances, it was unlikely that Mom was going to believe me. I was made to stand in a chair facing the wall for half an hour. Mom stressed that the reason she was punishing me was not so much that I had taken the cookie, but that I had lied to her. That was the last time I ever lied. As I said, things that happen to you early on tend to have a deep effect. It wasn't just that I didn't want to lie, or that I thought it was wrong. I just plain couldn't do it. If someone looked me and asked me a direct question, they got the truth. However, most people asking me questions I did not want to answer were not also pointing ray guns at my head. The situation at the moment was something different than I had ever faced before. "Well," growled Gracker, "did you tell anyone about us?" I swallowed hard. My mouth was dry as cotton. I could almost taste that old chocolate cookie. "Yes," I said unhappily. "I told someone." "Gracker?" cried Madame Pong. "Don't!" She was too late. He raised his ray gun, pointed it at me, and fired.
He died.
Chapter 6. Aliens in My Backpack. If Gracker had swept the ray from side to side, I think I would have been dead. But he held the gun steady, which meant the beam hit me in only one place, my right ear. "Ouch!" I cried, slapping my hand to the side of my head. "That hurt!" Which shows, I suppose, how quickly people can shift mindsets. 2 seconds earlier I had been expecting to die. Now I was complaining because my ear hurt. "Consider it a warning," snapped Gracker. "And try not to make me hurt you any more than I already have. It is hard to say how much damage you could have caused with your flapping food sucker. If our quarry escapes, I may take you back to stand trial in his place." Ignoring the tiny tyrant, I went to check my wound in the mirror that hangs over my dresser. I stared at my reflection for a moment, then blinked in dismay. Gracker had burned a tiny bloodless hole straight through the lobe. "You pierced my ear! Mama's going to kill me for this!" "Thank her for saving me the trouble." "What am I going to tell her?" I moaned. "You could try the truth," said Gracker, turning his ray gun back to my volcano. "But I wouldn't suggest it unless you want to see what happens when you really break the rules." I groaned and turned my back to the mirror. "Rod," said Madame Pong gently, I'm wondering if you can tell us anything about BKR. She pronounced it as BKR, but later they told me that BKR was the most accurate way to write it. Never heard of it, I said. It's not an it, it's a him, said the long-necked alien. Well then, I never heard of him. Who is he? The vicious bud plucker we've been sent here to capture, said the plant. Actually, I think he's going by another name here, said Madame Pong. Wait a moment while I check my notes. I expected her to fumble in her robe for a notepad or something. Instead, she pulled a wire from the metal band that circled her wrist. With one end of the wire still connected to her wrist, she stuck the other end into her ear. She closed her eyes for a moment, then nodded. Yes, she said. According to our spy work, BKR is hiding here under the name of Becker. Becker? I cried. Billy Becker's father is an alien? This was too good to be true, though it certainly explained a lot of things. How long has he been here? I asked, wondering if Billy was half alien himself, or if he had been adopted, or what. Her eyes still closed, Madame Pong wrinkled her brow. 12 of your years, she said. 12 years? I yelped. What took you so long to get here? Don't ask, growled Cracker. He sliced another chunk off my volcano. I don't know. He sliced another chunk off my volcano and passed it to the alien operating the energy conversion machine. I take it you know this person? Asked the plant, after floating down the volcano to the level of the table. Then across to the edge. It raised its blossom to point up at me, but it had folded its petals to cover the glowing center, so I still couldn't see what was inside. I know this kid. At least, I guess it's his kid. I know his kid. At least, I guess it's his kid. Do you think he really had a kid here? Or did he just adopt him? Hard to say, murmured Madame Pong, pulling the wire from her ear. He is a wily opponent, and there is no telling what he might do. However, the child may be a good place to begin our investigation, especially while we are consigned to this miniature status. What do you think, Cracker? Cracker looked up at me and said, Madame Pong and I will be going to school with you tomorrow. You will be responsible for our safety. If anything happens to us, you will be held personally accountable by the Galactic Patrol and will probably have to stand trial. The GP does not take loss of its agents lightly. Thanks, I said. I'm sure I'll sleep better tonight knowing that. The lizard-faced alien snorted, and Cracker frowned at him. Ignoring Cracker, the long-nosed guy said, I am Snout. At least that is your language's version of my nickname. It has to do, as you can see, with my face. My real name is Flinge Iblick. I am the ship's mental officer. Is that like being the ship's psychologist? I asked. Don't answer, snapped Cracker. It's classified information. Flinge Iblick's snout rolled his eyes, but he smiled too, as if he was used to this kind of thing from Cracker, and didn't take it too seriously. Before he could say anything else, the four-legged alien waved his hand at me and said, Greetings upon you, Earthchild. I am Tar Gibbons. Pleased to meet you, I said. Should I call you Tar? Tar is not a name, said Madame Pong. It's an honorific, like Mr. or Doctor or Professor. What does it mean? I asked. Tar Gibbons waved a hand. Your language has no exact equivalent. In rough translations, it would be something like, wise and beloved warrior who can kill me with his little finger if he should so desire. I see, I said nervously, and I am Philogenius Esque Pimodium, burped the plant, but you can call me Phil. I had a feeling the three new aliens would have been glad to take a break and have a little chat with me, but Cracker wasn't about to let that happen. Back to work, he said. We've got a lot to do here. I'm sorry, Rod, said Madame Pong. Perhaps we can talk tomorrow? I was too wound up and too worried to go to sleep. My head was spinning with questions. What if Billy Becker's father found out that we were on to him? Would he come after me? Even more frightening, Would he come after my family? When she saw me tossing and turning, Madame Pong flew over to my bedside and began to sing to me. Within moments, I was sound asleep. The twins proved very useful the next morning. Between the oatmeal war and the Little Thing 1 flashing Little Thing 2's fluffy bunny down the toilet, my mother was so distracted that I was able to keep her from noticing my newly pierced ear. I didn't think I could keep it hidden forever, but for now, I figured I had enough to deal with. When I went back to my room after breakfast, Madame Pong handed me a small gold stud. "Put this in your ear," she said. "Where did you get it?" I asked in astonishment, wondering if they had been out robbing jewelry stores while I slept. "We made it out of some of this white stuff," added Phil, waving a tendril at my volcano. "This doesn't look like papier-mâché," I said, looking at the stud. "It's not," said Madame Pong. "We've converted the basic matter into new elements. This is a transmitter." "A transmitter?" "Yes, put it through the hole in your ear and we'll be able to talk to you while we're in your backpack. "Do you mind if I wait till we get outside?" I asked. "I don't want Mom to see it." "Delaying the moment of truth is like holding back birth," said Snout, tweaking the end of his nose so that it wobbled up and down. "I can live with that," I said. Gracker had decided to bring Snout along, so I left for school with 3 aliens in my backpack. Tar Gibbons and Phil were going to try and fix the ship while we were gone. "Hi, Rod," said Mickey when I met him at the bus stop. Then his eyes went wide. "Oh, wow! When did you get your ear pierced? I can't believe your mother let you do it." "She didn't," I said. "You're kidding! I can't believe you did it without telling her." "Neither can I replied with perfect honesty. We had to wait outside the school doors until the official opening time. I always hated that because it was one of the times Billy Becker was most apt to pick on me. On the other hand, since the aliens wanted me to get them a close-up look at the little bully, this might be a good time for it. I looked around. Billy was nowhere in sight. I decided to check on the aliens. Opening my backpack, I peeked inside. The 3 of them were a little disheveled, but other than that, they looked fine. Bending my head over the backpack as if I was searching for something, I whispered, "How are you doing?" Before they could answer, I felt a smack in the back of my head. "Official replacement for number 23, called Billy Becker gleefully. Without thinking, I straightened up. Big mistake. Billy's pal, Arnie, was standing right there, too. Looking past me, he spotted the aliens. "Hey, what's this?" he cried. Before I could stop him, he plunged his hand into my backpack and pulled out Gracker. Chapter 7. Action Figures. I held my breath, wondering if Arnie would squeeze Gracker until he popped, or if maybe Gracker would zap Arnie. To my astonishment, nothing happened right away. When Arnie lifted the little alien to examine him, Gracker held so still he might as well have been made of plastic, which, as it turns out, was exactly what Arnie took to be the case. "This little guy is pretty cool," he said admiringly. "Where'd you get him? Albright?" "Can't lie. Didn't buy him. What to say?" I thought fast and told the basic truth. "I found him." "Huh?" "I thought so. I lost one just like this yesterday." And with that, Arnie stuffed Gracker into his jacket pocket. "Hey!" I cried. "Give him back! He's mine!" Okay, that last sentence wasn't strictly true. Gracker wasn't exactly mine, but you know what I meant. "You said you found him," said Arnie. "I'm telling you I lost him. Want to make something of it?" Before I could answer him, Madame Pong's voice sounded in my ear. "Rod, what's going on?" "Later," I snapped. "Later?" sneered Arnie. "How about right now?" "I wasn't talking to you," I said. "Oh, who were you talking to?" What was I supposed to tell him? That I was talking to an alien? Stuck for an answer, I stood there like some kind of idiot. "What a dweeb," said Arnie. "Come on, Billy, let's go." The 2 creeps sauntered off. I considered chasing them and trying to get Gracker back, but the truth was, if I pushed things, Arnie was likely to end up with not only Gracker in his pocket, but Madame Pong and Snout as well. I decided it was better to retreat before things got worse. Besides, I had a feeling that Gracker could take care of himself. I only wish I could say the same for me. I thought as I dug my comb out of my pocket and started cleaning the remains of the poor number 23 out of my hair. Are those the aliens you were telling me about last night? Asked Mickey after Arnie and Billy were out of earshot. For a moment, I thought he finally understood the truth. Then he asked where I had gotten them and how much they cost. I sighed. I found them, I repeated. I don't think you can get them around here. Come on, Rod, I want some too. They're the coolest action figures I've seen in a long time. I'm serious. No place around here sells them. Well, let me look at the others, he said, reaching toward my backpack. No! All right, he said, throwing up his hands. Boy, are you touchy today. Madame Pong's voice sounded in my ear again. Tell him you're afraid that you'll lose the rest of us if you take us out of the pack. Good idea. I'm not touchy, I said. I'm just afraid Arnie and Billy might come back and steal the others if I take them out now. Mickey sighed, but he knew what I said was true, so backed off. When school started, I took Madame Pong and Snout out of my backpack and slipped them in my desk. Then I bent down and stared into the desk, pretending I was looking for something. This did not look suspicious because I am always looking for something in my desk, which is usually pretty messy. Between the books, crayons, toys, crumpled papers, and poor aliens didn't have much room. The most embarrassing thing was the half-eaten sandwich that had gone moldy. Here they are with all this stuff in his desk. He had a half-eaten moldy sandwich in his desk.
Lift it up high.
I will.
Ew! Disgusting! Dean's gonna be like that one day.
I think you both are gonna be like that one day.
What do you mean? Hey, I'm more.
Are you cleaner than Dean?
Not true. He leaves his trash when we eat up here.
Oh, that's true. If I had known you were coming, I would have cleaned house, I whispered, pulling out the sandwich so I could throw it away. Better to live as if company is always on the way, said Snout, bowing his head and nodding.
Hey, but Dean leaves stuff at school more than me.
That's true. You get along fine with my mother, I replied, putting my hand into the side of the desk as if I were digging for something. I moved my face even closer to the aliens and hissed, What are we going to do? I do not know, replied Madame Pong. She looked very worried. This development endangers the mission. However, Gracker is very good at taking care of himself. Perhaps he will escape on his own. My greatest fear is that he will do something drastic. Her voice trailed off. I put my finger to my earlobe. Gracker had pierced my ear just for saying too much. What would he do to Arnie if he got really desperate? Much as I disliked the kid, I didn't want him to end up dead. On the other hand, Gracker was only 2 inches tall, and in the clutches of a kid who was not known for being careful with toys. Annoying as the little alien could be, I didn't want him to end up dead either. Before I could decide who was in more danger, Arnie or Gracker, I was interrupted by a hand on my shoulder. Are you ready to stop playing and join us, Rod? Asked Miss Maloney. Sorry, I said, scrambling to my seat. Well, I tried to scramble into my seat. I missed by a couple of inches, slid to the floor, and had to try again. The rest of the class laughed. I would have blushed, but I was used to it by now. They don't call me Rod the Clod for nothing. The morning passed slowly. I was so worried about Gracker I wasn't able to concentrate on what Miss Maloney was saying, which let me make a fool of myself at least twice that I can remember. By lunchtime, I was really nervous. Would Arnie take Gracker to lunch with him? Would he do something dangerous or stupid? His two specialties. What would Gracker do to me if he got out of this? As it turned out, Arnie's interest in Gracker was less in having him than in taking him away from me, so he didn't bother to bring him to lunch. By the time we got back from the cafeteria, the little alien was no longer in Arnie's desk. He was back in mine. When Arnie realized that his new action figure was missing, he looked at me suspiciously. But as I had been right in his sight all through lunch, it was clear I couldn't possibly have taken the alien out of his desk. And he couldn't complain to Miss Maloney, since ownership of the toy was not a matter he would particularly want to bring up. Even though he couldn't figure out any way that I could have taken Gracker from his desk, I was sure Arnie would still assume it was my fault. I was equally sure I was going to pay for it at recess. In that much, I was right. Recess didn't start out too badly. Madame Pong and Gracker wanted to stay in the room to investigate things while the class was outside. Gracker ordered Snout to come with me, to observe the playground action. When no one was looking, I tucked the little guy in my front pocket, and he made amusing comments to me while Mickey and I sat on the monkey bars. Finally, he made me laugh out loud while Mickey was telling me about getting in trouble with his father that morning. Well, I'm glad you think it's funny, he said, jumping down from the bars and walking away. Mickey, wait, I yelled. I didn't mean it. But he ran off to play with some other kids. I most humbly apologize, said Snout. I did not want to cause trouble between you and your friend. Don't worry, I said. He gets sensitive sometimes. It won't last. I was the one who have been worrying. I got off the monkey bars and started to wander toward the building. As I walked, Snout started to tell me a little about his planet. I got so interested in what he was saying, I didn't look where I was going. Major error. Next thing I knew, Arnie and Billy had me cornered against a blank wall near the kindergarten rooms. While it would normally have been Billy who took the role of torturer, today Arnie had a personal grievance against me. So it was Billy who kept an eye out for the teacher, while Arnie pushed me against the wall and said, "Give it back, Albright." "Give what back?" I asked, trying to sound innocent. "You know. That little monster guy. You took it out of my desk. I want it back." "I didn't take anything out of your desk, Arnie, honest." Arnie looked at me funny. Even though he liked to beat me up, he knew I didn't ever lie. "What are you trying to pull, Albright?" "Nothing. I'm just trying to get through the day without getting my face pounded in." More truth. "Well, better luck tomorrow," said Arnie, drawing back his fist. I saw the punch heading straight for my face. I was sure I was dead, or at least severely wounded. Then time went all funny. It's kind of a long chapter coming up.
Do it.
Chapter 8. Temporal Disruption. Arnie's fist was heading straight for my nose. I could see it coming, inch by inch, as if it were moving in slow motion. I was so boggled by what was happening, I almost didn't realize that this was my chance to get out of the way. Finally, I ducked. Arnie's fist shot past my shoulder and smashed into the wall. "Ow!" he screamed. "What did you do that for, Albright?" Like it was my duty to stand there and let him cream me. I got ready to run, figuring he was really going to get me now. Instead, he started crying. That was when I noticed the blood streaming down his knuckles. Cradling his injured hand, he ran off toward Miss Maloney. Billy Becker stared at me in astonishment. "How did you duck so fast?" he demanded. "Look at all the practice I've had," I replied, wondering if he was going to beat me up on Arnie's behalf. But he just squinted at me for a minute, then turned and walked away. Once Billy was gone, I sat down against the wall. "What happened?" I whispered to Snout. "What did you do?" "I am not the master of mental arts for nothing," he replied smugly. "That was an example of temporal disruption, one of my specialties." "What does that mean?" "I put you into a different time frame. In other words, I set things up so that time went more slowly for you than it did for your attacker. That gave you time to duck. It takes a great deal of energy, and I can't manage it for long, but it seemed a reasonable thing to do under the circumstances." "I'm glad you're on my side." "Don't be too glad," he replied. "Being on our side means that BKR is on the other side. He is a fierce enemy, and you seem to have enemies enough as it is." He paused and added, "Perhaps we can help you with that while we're here." And that is just what he did for the rest of the day. For example, as we were heading in from the playground, I got a message through the transmitter in my ear. "Enemy approaching from behind. Duck left." As I stepped aside, Billy Becker went stumbling past with the next bug he had been planning to add to his collection. He looked so astonished and frustrated that I almost felt sorry for him. As I thought about it, I did kind of feel bad. After all, I knew something that he didn't. At least, I assumed he didn't know his father was an alien. Or did he? Was that why he acted so weird all the time? Whether he knew or not, he was still in for an awful surprise if Gracker and company were successful. If they had their way, his father would be headed for the interplanetary Hooskow. Of course, it was possible that Billy and his mother would just stay here, and Billy would be worse than ever. Now that was a revolting idea. After recess, we had math. Miss Maloney was starting a unit on dividing fractions, and it made almost no sense to me until Madame Pong started sending me explanations through my transmitter. This wasn't so bad. A couple of times I did have a problem understanding her because of some background noise at first. I thought it was static. I finally realized what the noise had actually been when it came time to hand in my homework. It was the sound of someone chewing. What made me realize this was the fact that when I reached into my desk and pulled out my math assignment, it looked like a lace doily. I stood up slowly, holding the tattered paper in front of me. "Oh, dear," I heard Madame Pong whisper. "For heaven's sake, Rod," snapped Miss Maloney. "Where's your assignment?" I swallowed hard, wishing I could lie. "Rod?" Glancing down at my desk, blushing, I mumbled, "Aliens ate my homework, Miss Maloney." I wish I could get a laugh like that when I tell a joke. My cheeks burning with embarrassment, I slumped in my chair. Gracker, of course, was furious. "Saying that we ate your homework was in direct contravention of my orders," he raged that afternoon when we were back in my house. "It was brilliant," said Madame Pong serenely. Gracker turned to her in astonishment. "What do you mean?" What Snap did on the playground was likely to generate some suspicion. Rod's answer to his teacher sounded so absurd that it has distracted people from what is really happening. You might make a good diplomat, Rod, she added, turning to me. The creative use of truth is one of the most important of our skills. Besides, she continued, turning back to Gracker, if you had been able to control your appetite, the whole incident might have been avoided. I had been wondering which one of them had actually eaten my math. Gracker growled, but I could tell that Madame Pong had scored a heavy point. The whole mess got put aside when Phil floated out of the Furkle and said, "I think we've got it fixed. Let's go try her out." The plan was that the aliens would fly back to Seldom Seen, enlarge the ship, and get on with their work. I knelt in front of my desk. "I'm sorry about this afternoon," I said, "and I really did appreciate the help that you guys gave me dealing with Billy and Arnie." "It was our duty," said Gracker gruffly. "After all, you are a deputy of the Galactic Patrol." "It was our pleasure," said Madame Pong firmly. For some reason it felt better to think that they had helped me because they liked me, rather than just because they had to. "If all goes well, we will not see you again," said Gracker, his voice still stiff and formal. "Assuming that to be the case, let me thank you on behalf of the galaxy for the assistance you have rendered to date." He stood for a moment, his big jaw grinding. Finally, Madame Pong nudged him with her elbow. With a sigh, he stretched out his hand and said, "Please accept this small token of our gratitude." On his palm rested a circle of some material about the color of my flesh. "What is it?" I asked. "A patch for the hole in your ear."
A what?
I said it wrong. "A patch for the hole in your ear," said Madame Pong with a smile. "Here, let me put it on for you." Taking the circle from Gracker's hand, she floated to my shoulder. Taking out the gold stud, she applied the patch to my ear. "There," she said, sounding satisfied. "Go look." Madame Pong still on my shoulder, I went to my mirror. I stared at my ear in astonishment. You couldn't tell that anything had happened to it. "Thanks," I said happily. "It was the least we could do," said Madame Pong. She flew back to join the others. Gracker gave me a salute. I saluted back, feeling kind of funny about having the little guys leave. They had only been here for a day, and certainly they had been more trouble than anything else. Yet in a strange way, it had been fun having them around. I had certainly liked having Snout foil Billy's bug-squashing attempt during recess. Madame Pong made a bow to me. I bowed back. The 5 of them climbed into the Furkle. "Wait until I open the window," I cried. Gracker's voice came through the speaker. "Hold flight until exit prepared," he said. I opened the window. The ship shot past me. I watched it disappear among the trees of the swamp. Then I lay down on my bed and stared at the ceiling. I guess that old line about the best laid plans of mice and men applies to aliens too, because about 15 minutes later, the Furkle flew back through my window. It was a good thing I hadn't bothered to close it. The Furkle landed on my desk. After a moment, the ramp extended and Gracker stepped out. He was not a happy alien. "What happened?" I asked. "Nothing," he said tensely. "Sorry, boss," said Phil, floating down the ramp after Gracker. He was waving his leaves and vines wildly about as if trying to explain something. "I told you it might not work." Turning to me, the plant added, "We're missing a vital part. In your language, it would be called—" He paused and waved his leaves, as if thinking. "I think the technical word is doohickey," said Tar Gibbons. "Either that or thingummy. It's also known as the focus diffusion gizmo because it either focuses or diffuses the enlarging ray, depending on the size of the ship. Usually we just call it the FD gizmo." "Right," said Phil. "The FD gizmo. Anyway, Tar Gibbons and I tried to create a replacement, but we didn't get it right. No surprise. These things are tricky. But Meathead here thinks it's an interplanetary crime." I was astonished to hear Phil talk that way. Well, it was no surprise that he called Gracker a meathead. We were all meatheads from a plant's point of view, but I figured he would be required to show a little more respect for his commanding officer. Madame Pong was next down the ramp. "I'm sorry, Rod," she said, bowing again. "It looks as if we'll have to ask your hospitality for another night." I smiled. To my surprise, I was actually glad to have them back. That night, I worked on repairing the hole the aliens had made in my volcano, while the aliens themselves worked on their ship. They told me stories while they worked. It was kind of cozy. Reminded me of what it used to be like when my dad still lived with us. Actually, I guess I started it when I asked Madame Pong a question about what she did. She responded by telling me this long story about growing up on her planet and having to harvest trailing wurtmungle in order to earn money to go to school so that she could become a diplomat. That got the rest of them reminiscing about their childhoods. It was funny, the things they had in common, and the things that were different. For example, nearly all of them had problems with their brothers and or sisters. "Family problems are universal," said Phil, waving a leaf. "Take me. My brother was a real nut. And my sister, what a bunch of fruits." Before I could figure out if he was joking, Tar Gibbons said, you get the joke? So, Phil is the plant, right? Mm-hmm. The plant-looking thing with the rocket bottom. So he's saying that his take my brother. Take me. My brother was a real nut. And my sister, what a bunch of fruits. And my sisters, what a bunch of fruits.
Oh, they're all plants.
They're plants. A nut comes from a plant, right? As a plant, and fruits are from plants.
Like a pecan tree?
Huh?
Is that a vegetable?
Yeah. Well, that's what I don't know, but that's what they're. He's like he said couldn't tell if he was joking or not because he could mean it like one was crazy and the other ones were weird, and so he did, or were they actually, doesn't know. Before I could figure out if he was joking, Tar Gibbons said, "I have no problem with brothers or sisters because I have none." "Did you like being an only child?" I asked. "Oh, I wasn't an only child. I had several siblings. Just no brothers or sisters." "Wait a minute. Siblings are people who have the same parents as you do. So you had to have brothers or sisters. Brothers are male, correct?" I nodded. "And sisters are female." When I nodded again, Tar Gibbons spread his arms, leaned that long neck forward, blinked at me, and said, "Then I don't have any." Well, that just doesn't make any sense. I was starting to get a little angry because I thought he was teasing me. Why not? They have to be one or the other. Oh, don't be silly. I am neither male nor female. I'm a furfle. Is that more like a boy or more like a girl? Actually, it's more like a pippic than anything. I turned to Madame Pong, but she just spread her hands. I don't think you want to get into a discussion of biology as it is practiced on Tar Gibbons's planet. Okay, I said. Just tell me what pronouns to use when I'm talking about him, her, it. I mean, see what I mean? It will do just fine, said Tar Gibbons. What will do just fine? It will, he repeated. What will? It. Refer to me as an it. That seems pretty rude, I said nervously. Not as rude as calling me a he or a she, it said. I sighed and turned back to my volcano. I had to think about this for a while. Before I could get another glob of papier-mâché on the frame, Gracker said, I've made a decision. I turned to look at him. I got nervous whenever he said something like that. Oh, yeah, sorry. I've made a decision. I turned to look at him. I got nervous whenever he said something like that. Tomorrow, Rod will take us to the BKR's house. We should look around inside. I can't. I have to go to school. No, you have to take us to BKR's house, replied Gracker calmly. But if I don't go to school... Well, you can imagine how that argument went. If I skipped school, I might get grounded for a while. But if I didn't take the aliens to BKR's house, I would be hauled into space and stand trial for obstructing justice. Gracker might not play fair, but he almost always won his arguments. Madame Pong fished the little gold transmitter out of her pocket. I guess we'd better put this back in your ear, Rod, she said. Flying to my shoulder, she peeled off the patch she had put over the hole. Gracker had burned through my earlobe and reinserted the gold stud. Then she replaced the patch. Perfect, she said. No one will even know it's there. She had just flown back to my desk when my door swung open and my mother walked in. The aliens froze. She walked over to the Furkle. To my horror, she reached down and picked up Gracker. Chapter 9. House Hunting. Well, said Mom with a frown, is this that toy that caused all the trouble today? I looked at her in surprise. How did you hear about that? Miss Maloney called me. Arnie Markle broke his hand today. His father is threatening a lawsuit. Arnie broke his hand trying to punch me, I cried. If I hadn't ducked, he might have broken my nose instead of his hand. My mother sighed. I know, sweetheart. The thing is, we can't afford any trouble with them. I sighed too. Ever since my father left, we've been tight for money, especially since he doesn't send any support. Sometimes it's hard not to hate him for that. Mom looked at Gracker. Maybe if you just give him this toy. I can't do that, I shouted. She blinked, surprised at my reaction. It would be wrong, I said desperately. Like paying them off or something. To my astonishment, she began to blush. You're right, honey. I'm sorry. That was a bad idea. But I really don't know what I'm going to do if they actually sue. We just can't afford a lawyer right now.
How would they sue them when he's trying to break a bone in him?
Can they really sue us? I asked. I didn't do anything wrong, honest. People can sue over almost anything. I don't think the Markles would win.
Even
but
over just looking.
But they can afford it, and we can't. Arnie's dad knows that this is his way of pushing us around. Jeez, he's no better than his kid.
Pause that. Can you sue someone if they just touch you?
I mean, I guess you can do the act of suing, but it doesn't mean that anything is gonna come of it, because it has to go in front of a judge. A judge might see the case, see the information about it, and then just throw it out, and so it doesn't get to go anywhere anyway.
So basically you spent like money trying to
maybe
do it all for nothing.
That's the way it goes sometimes, said Mom. She tossed Gracker onto the bed. Don't leave these lying around, all right? She left the room. I could tell that she was trying not to cry. I don't know who I hated more at that moment, Arnie, his father, or my own father, who had left us in this situation where Arnie and his parents could cause us so much trouble. Ouch, said Gracker, straightening himself out. That hurt. There's his mom holding Gracker with the spaceship and the other little aliens down there looking like action figures.
Bro, that would be at least $70 or $100.
And that spaceship is cool.
Yeah, I want that.
Just imagine.
That is a cool looking spaceship, huh?
Wait, let me see it again. Whoa. Hey, it's like the destroyer thing from Ninja Turtles.
Oh, the Technodrome?
Yes.
Because it's got that eye sticking out the top?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like a ball.
Yeah. What am I going to do? I asked. Don't worry about it, he said, dusting himself off and flying back to the desk. What do you mean? Why shouldn't I worry about it? You don't have to face Arnie tomorrow. You have to skip school. You can take us to BKR's house, remember? What a terrific solution, I said with a groan, flopping onto my bed. I stared at the ceiling, wondering if being taken to Alpha Centauri to stand trial might be the best way to get out of this mess. At some point, I fell into a sleep that was marked by wild nightmares. Given the state of my life at that moment, it wasn't much different from being awake. Despite my hopes, my troubles did not magically disappear overnight. On the other hand, they didn't get any bigger either. They were still 2 inches tall. A new thought occurred to me as I was getting dressed. You know, I said to Gracker, who was standing on my dresser examining a monster trading card that looked as if it might be a portrait of one of his relatives. Even if I wanted to skip school, there's no way I could do it. Why not? He asked, setting down the card. Well, when I leave the house, my mother will be watching, so I have to get on the bus. That takes me straight to school. When I get off the bus, there'll be a teacher watching. So just when and how am I supposed to get away to take you to Billy Becker's house? Gracious, said Tar Gibbons, who was climbing out of the ship at that moment. You don't have much time to yourself. Don't they trust you? I thought about pointing out that I had a lot more time to myself before the Furkle crashed through my window, but I decided against it. Do you have any other way of getting to school? Asked Gracker. I hesitated. If only I could lie. Well, asked Gracker. I sighed. I might be able to talk my mother into letting me ride my bike. We had been talking about me riding to school for some time now. Mom had been resisting because it's so far, but I could tell she was going to relent. I could tell she was going to relent soon. Make it happen, said Gracker. I sighed again and went to breakfast.
Oh, it was in the morning?
Yeah, I guess he fell asleep. Remember it said he fell asleep and had nightmares?
Oh, yeah.
My mother was looking pretty grim. I'm sorry about last night, Rod, she said. I knew at once that I had her. She was in the grip of a guilt attack, and it was going to be easy to talk her into letting me ride the bike. Of course, once she found out that I had used the occasion to skip school, it would probably be 10 years before she let me ride there on my own again. After breakfast, I said goodbye to the things, then climbed onto my bike and pedaled out of the driveway, supposedly heading for school. I had 3 aliens in my backpack. Tar Gibbons and Phil again stayed home to work on the ship. A totally different destination in mind, and a load of guilt like you wouldn't believe. I think Tar Gibbons is I think Tar Gibbons is that one. The turtle-looking one with the legs and the long neck.
Okay, the person who eats his science
That,
project.
Huh.
That feeling is not fun.
What feeling?
The nervous feeling, and you done something wrong. It's not a good feeling.
No, it's not a good feeling.
It's like a heavy weight.
Yeah.
Whenever I broke my computer, that's what I felt.
Yeah.
And it feels weird to breathe once it happens.
Yeah.
It feels like, oh no, and it feels weird.
Yeah. But even though Mom and I will get mad, and there may be consequences, it's best to just come out and tell it, because we're going to respond better knowing that you were honest than if we have to find out on our own,
Mm-hmm. Like I did with my vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
Dang, I remember the time
match the book.
It was a gorgeous spring morning, warm enough that I didn't need a jacket. About half a mile from the house, I stopped to ask if the aliens wanted to ride where they could see. Cracker and Snout opted for my front pocket, Madame Pong for my shoulder. I was worried that she might fall off, when she assured me that she could manage it safely. Even if she did, I remembered that she was wearing a rocket belt. The leaves were just budding out, and the air smelled sweet and fresh, except for when we passed McGuire's chicken farm. They had just cleaned a winter's worth of manure out of the barns, and the smell was overwhelming. "What an aroma!" cried Snout, sounding almost joyous. "It makes me think of home. I guess life is different everywhere you go." "Rod," said Madame Pong, speaking directly into my ear, "I know we are making your life difficult. I will try to see that you are rewarded if we survive this mission." "If?" I yelped. I stopped pedaling, but since we were going downhill, we kept moving. I thought we had made it clear that this was very dangerous," she said. "Then why are you dragging me into this? I'm just a kid." "Does that exempt you from doing what is necessary?" she asked, sounding puzzled. "On this planet, we save stuff like that for grown-ups. We try to protect kids." Madame Pong was silent for a moment. Finally, she said, "I don't understand. If you try to protect children, why do you let them live where people are shooting at each other all the time?" I thought about some of the things I had seen on the evening news and decided maybe our society wasn't as serious about protecting kids as it likes to pretend, which left me with nothing to say to Madame Pong and no excuse for not going to BKR's house. I knew where Billy Becker lived because
What's BKR stand for?
I think that was the alien that they're looking for. Becker?
Billy Becker's dad.
Yeah.
The BKR best known river.
Sure. I knew where Billy Becker lived because once when several of us had stayed late for a special project, his father had given me a ride home. He had pointed out the house as we drove past it. Remembering that ride now, I shivered. I had been driven home by an interstellar criminal. The Becker house was on the outskirts of town. That made sense, given the fact that it was a criminal hideout. But it worked for our purposes, too. If the house had been in town, I probably would have been stopped by someone wanting to know why I wasn't in school before I could have gotten anywhere near it. Even out of town, I figured we would have better luck if we waited for the morning traffic to die down. So I pulled off the road and hid in a copse of trees beside a little stream. I sat down on a rock. Cracker, Madame Pong, and Snout used their rocket belts to float down to the bank of the stream. Cracker began to pace back and forth at the edge of the water, his green brow furrowed in concentration. "How much longer do you think we need to wait?" he asked after about a minute. He reminded me of things asking, "How much farther is it?" when we were in the car. "Probably another half hour," I said. "By that time, most people will have made it to work." He began to pace again. Suddenly, he shouted in surprise as he came face to face with a frog. He pulled out his ray gun, but the frog jumped into the water before he could shoot. Cracker wrinkled his nose. I tried not to laugh. "Whew. What are you going to do when we get there?" I asked. "It depends on whether there's anyone inside," said Snout. "How are you going to know that without going and asking?" "I'll use certain metal techniques to perform a bioscan. This will tell me if there are any large masses of living matter inside. If BKR has left the house for some reason, for example, if he has a job to help maintain his disguise, we can just go inside." "Don't we have to have a search warrant or something? We have laws against breaking into people's houses, you know, even criminals' houses." "BKR is not a citizen of your planet and therefore is not subject to your law," said Cracker. I wasn't sure that covered the situation, but not being a lawyer, I didn't figure I could argue the matter. So I changed the subject. What about Miss Becker? If she is home, you will talk to her in order to distract her while we slip inside. Talk to her about what? Make something up, snapped Cracker. I can't. I don't tell lies. Then think of something true. That was a lot of help. In the end, I didn't have to worry about it. Snout's bioscan showed no one home. Good, said Cracker. We can all go in. All of us? That's what I said. I rode my bike up to the Beckers' front door. Being out of town, there were not a lot of other houses around. Just 3. In fact, from which we could be seen at all. Snout did another bioscan, checking on the neighbors. 2 of the houses were empty. Taking a chance that no one was watching from the 3rd, we rode around back so I could hide the bike. The yard was neat and trim.
I thought it said 2 houses.
3. Snout took out another device and used it to do a tech scan. This was a lot like the bioscan, only now he was looking for any kind of device that would sound an alert if someone entered the house. Any doubts I had about whether there was really an alien in the residence here faded when Snout announced that he had found 4 monitoring systems. I might have been able to convince myself that one system was a burglar alarm. Rare, but not impossible. But no one around here has 4 burglar alarms. After a few minutes of fiddling with the tech scan control box, Snout said, I have disabled the systems. It is now safe to enter the building. The aliens directed me to carry them to the back door. I held up my hand like a platform so Snout could stand on it. He took yet another device from his cloak and did something to the lock. The doorknob turned by itself. The door swung open. With the aliens riding on my shoulder, I entered BKR's lair. I moved slowly, carefully, expecting something to spring out at me any second. But the house was almost disappointingly normal. Normal kitchen, normal bathroom, normal living room. It wasn't until Cracker told me to open the hall closet that I began to scream.
Please keep going.
Alright, I think this next chapter is not that long. So, Chapter 10. The Real Enemy. Hanging in the closet, staring at us with sightless eyes, were Mr. and Mrs. Becker. Oh my God, I cried. He killed them. Billy Becker killed his parents. Don't be silly, said Cracker. Those aren't real people. They sure look real, I said, backing away from the closet. They're just androids, said Madame Pong soothingly. She was clinging to my ear so that my violent trembling wouldn't throw her to the floor. At least, you would call them androids at this stage of your planet's development. The technology is actually a little more advanced than that, but the idea is close enough. But that's Mr. Becker. I've met him before. No, that is an android that has been out in public using the name Mr. Becker. Why would BKR have an android of himself? I said. I don't get it. I think I do, said Snout. We've been on the wrong path all this time. Mr. Becker is not our quarry. His son is. You mean Billy Becker is an alien criminal? I cried. It would seem to be the logical conclusion, said Madame Pong. Can you believe it? My arch enemy, the rotten, lying little creep, was no mere kid. He was a fugitive mastermind from another planet, wanted across the galaxy for his hideous crimes. That should tell you something about my life. Most kids get bullied by some point or another, but how many 6th graders get bullied by a kid who turns out to be a criminal genius from the stars in disguise? There's a picture of him looking in the closet.
That guy has a butt chin. That's creepy.
That's a creepy picture, huh?
It's like a potato sack hanging up, but big.
But why? I asked. I don't get it. I have a theory, said Madame Pong. Let's hear it, said Cracker gruffly. I got the feeling he didn't like this discovery any more than I did. Well, as near as we can make out, children are close to invisible in this culture. If BKR had come to Earth and established himself as a rich adult with a lot of power, it would have been easy for us to track him down. But simply by appearing to be a child, he was more likely to stay undetected. I would guess that he has been doing this over and over in different places for the last 12 years. Snout put one of his spindly fingers beside his long nose and said, That makes sense. It could also have to do with his stat. Divulging classified information is a crime, said Cracker fiercely. What was he going to say? I cried. It's classified, repeated Cracker. We can't tell you. Look, if you can drag me away from school to help you with this mission, I think the least you can do is take me into your confidence. What was he going to say? Cracker folded his arms, shook his green gorilla head from side to side, and said, Classified is classified. All right, have it your way, I snapped. We don't have time to argue. We have to get out of here. Why? Asked Madame Pong. What if Billy, BKR, whoever, comes back? We don't want him to catch us here. He'll be in school all day, won't he? Said Cracker. I suppose so, I said uneasily. Then we must take advantage of this time to examine the house. We may find information that will be useful in capturing him, or that can be used against him when he goes on trial again. I thought he was already convicted, I said. He is, said Madame Pong. Cracker would like to go for the maximum punishment. What is that? I asked. We make him stay on Earth, said Snout. What? Just joking, he said, tweaking the end of his nose so that it bounced up and down. Aliens who can figure their sense of humor. After half an hour of carrying the aliens around, I returned to the living room. Sitting on the floor, I put the aliens on the coffee table so we could look at each other as we talked. The first thing I said was, This place is so normal, it's almost suspicious. What do you mean? Asked Madame Pong. It's like a magazine version of a real home, I explained. Too neat and perfect to be real. Almost everyone has some little quirk that make them interesting. You know, they make pot holders out of roadkill or decorate lampshades with pictures of Elvis or something. At least that was what my dad used to say. I paused as a stab of pain shot through my heart. I tried to let the moment go by, but it was as if something had been let loose in the room. Where is your father, Rod? Asked Madame Pong. That's classified information, I snapped, sounding ruder than I intended. She nodded and didn't pursue the question, which I appreciated. Cracker looked puzzled, as if he didn't understand what was going on, but Snout looked away, and his nose drooped. Well, we must be missing something, said Madame Pong. BKR would not be here without items he could use in case of emergency. They must be hidden somewhere. A cross-dimensional closet? Suggested Snout. What's that? I asked. A storage device, said Cracker. It's an opening to another dimension, lined with strong, stretchable material that can expand with the amount of stuff you put in it. Sort of an unbreakable interdimensional balloon, added Snout. I could use one of those, I said. My own closet was so full of junk that my mother claimed the door should only be opened by trained professionals. They're very handy, agreed Madame Pong, but also a great luxury. They take an enormous amount of energy to maintain. BKR can afford the expense, said Cracker. He is, after all, fabulously wealthy. From stealing stuff? I asked. Oh, he doesn't steal things, said Madame Pong. He was born rich. But I thought he was a criminal. There are far worse crimes than stealing. There are far worse crimes than stealing, said Cracker darkly. Anyway, BKR certainly has enough energy credits to maintain a cross-dimensional closet. Energy credits? I asked, trying desperately not to get lost in this conversation. Energy is our basic unit of exchange, said Snout. Makes more sense than gold, added Cracker with a sneer. Not much you can do with gold once you've got it. I'll do an energy check, said Snout, before I could ask any more about their monetary systems, which was just as well, I guess, since I didn't want to stay in BKR's house any longer than necessary. The purple alien removed a small device covered with loops of wire from his cloak.
Wait, let me see. Which one's the purple?
Which one's the purple what?
Alien.
Snout. It was that one right there.
I thought that was
Bring it up high.
No, Madame Pong, I think, is
It's that yellow one.
the yellow one up there.
Bring it up high so I can see.
Cracker's the green one.
Yeah.
He looks weird. Says Madame Pong and Snout. Yeah, Snout.
The purple alien removed a small device covered with loops of wire from his cloak. Still standing on the coffee table, he began to turn in a small circle. He was about 3/4 of the way around the device when the device began to beep. Flibbing! He exclaimed, which I decided must be like shouting bingo or eureka in our language. Take us that way, Rod. I extended my arm so the three of them could climb onto my shoulder, then began to walk in the direction Snout had indicated. He kept adjusting his little machine as I walked, sending me right or left as if we were playing a game of hot and cold. We stopped in front of the TV. Here? I asked. By all appearances, said Snout. Set us on top of it, please. I did as he asked. Wait a minute while I make an adjustment, he said, tinkering with a box he had been holding. All right. Now run this around the edge of the screen. I took the box from his hands. It was no bigger than a blueberry. Holding it delicately between my fingertips, I did as he had directed. Good. Now see if you can pry off the screen. I put the little box on top of the television, then hooked my fingernails over the edge of the glass. It tipped forward so easily it caught me off guard. I tried to catch it, but it slipped through my fingers and fell to the floor. Rod the Clod strikes again. To my relief, it didn't break. Then I realized it probably wasn't actually glass, but some alien material that wouldn't break even if a rhino started tap dancing on it. Excellent, said Cracker. Let's see what he has in there. Shoulder, please. I put my hand on top of the TV and let them walk onto my shoulder. When all three of them were safely in place, I bent toward and put my head through the hole. I felt like I was getting a shock from a small battery. Not strong enough to really hurt, but definitely weird. I shouted in surprise. What's the matter, Rod? Asked Madame Pong. It tingles. Of course it tingles, said Cracker impatiently. Your head is in one dimension while the rest of your body is in another. Is that dangerous? I asked. What about my blood? Is it flowing in and out of my regular dimension? Probably, said Snout. It's very profound when you think about it, almost metaphysical. Can we skip philosophy and get this over with? I asked. I don't know how much more of this I can take. Hold on while I get some light in here, said Cracker. So there I was, my rear end waving around in an alien criminal's living room, and my head in another dimension, when a familiar voice cried, Why, it's Rod Albright! I'd know that pudgy butt anywhere. Billy was home. I tried to back out of the TV, but before I could get started, someone gave me a solid push. I hurtled through the television, out of this world, and into the cross-dimensional closet. Chapter 11. The Storage Dimension. Before I could sort myself out from the piles of stuff surrounding me, I heard a click, followed by a laugh. The click, it turned out, was made by BKR snapping the television screen back in place. The laugh came from BKR, alias Billy Becker, who was pressing his face against the screen and staring in at us. As I watched, he pushed his face closer and closer, flattening his features against the surface. Soon his nose was spreading out like a blob of melting ice cream. But he kept pressing until his smile had smooshed from one side of the screen to the other, and his eyes looked like a pair of fried eggs with blue yolks. Stop, I cried. It's disgusting.
What's disgusting?
His face smashed up against the TV. Because remember, Billy Becker?
Remember what?
He got pushed in. BKR giggled, a wild, high-pitched sound that sent a chill down my spine. Then he began to peel his face away from the screen. That's when I realized it was a mask. A Billy Becker mask that had been smushed across the screen.
It looks cute. Go hug it.
No, he's hugging it. He's hugging it. That look.
The top corner.
As he pulled the mask away, I could see the real face of BKR. The alien criminal my tiny companions had crossed a galaxy to capture. His skin was blue. He had orange spikes instead of hair. Other than that, he looked a lot like Shirley Temple. What a nice surprise, he said, leering in at us.
Wait, he's the alien now?
Yeah. That is Captain Gracker you've got with you, isn't it, Rod? I thought I recognized him when that idiot Arnie pulled him out of your backpack yesterday. Let the boy go, BKR, shouted Gracker. He is of no concern to you. I glanced at Gracker in surprise. It was the first time he had given any indication he cared what happened to me. BKR snorted. What does it matter whether he's of any concern to me? I have him, and that's enough. Of all the things I had experienced so far, I think the coldness in BKR's voice was the most frightening yet. No, he continued. The real concern is what am I going to do with you now? I don't want to leave you alone in my closet. I've got things stored there that might actually be of use to you. But should I bring you out here to take care of? Or should I just blow a hole through the back of the closet and let you drift off into the storage dimension? That is the decision I have to make. Madame Pong had climbed onto my shoulder. I felt her shudder at BKR's last suggestion, which was even scarier than the coldness in his voice. If what he was planning was that frightening to her, I knew I sure didn't want to experience it. What's the storage dimension like? I whispered. An interplanetary junkyard, she replied, her voice equally soft. I thought of the junkyard on the other side of Seldom Seen. It was pretty interesting. You can find almost anything you want there, added Snout. Only there's no air in most of it, so we'd probably be dead before we came across anything useful. You're awfully calm about this, I whispered. He bent his nose to the right and said, I've never improved a situation by worrying about it. Not having Snout's philosophical training, my own level of fear was quickly building toward pure panic. The confrontation with BKR was not improved by Gracker shouting, This is Captain Gracker speaking. Surrender now or face justice at the hands of the Galactic Patrol. Madame Pong sighed. BKR laughed hysterically. Well, I've made up my mind, he said. Enjoy the storage dimension, everyone. BKR, stop! Cried Madame Pong. He ignored her. Holding up what looked like a standard television remote control, he put his finger directly over a button. Smiling in at us, he said, Bye-bye, boys and girls. Before he could lower his finger and send us into the storage dimension, the good ship Ferkle zoomed into the room and smacked against his head. BKR screamed with rage as he fell out of sight. The Ferkle circled the room, then stopped in front of the TV. Hovering in midair, it aimed a purple ray at the screen, holding us in the storage dimension. It shimmered and began to melt. But before the Ferkle could finish the job, a blue hand reached up and swatted it sideways. Quick, Rod! Cried Madame Pong. Push on the barrier. I hesitated. If it was melting, it would probably be hot enough to burn my hands. Hurry! Cried Gracker. It's our only hope! Well, having no hands was better than being totally dead. I lunged forward. To my surprise, the screen wasn't hot at all. It popped out, and I burst through the front of the TV like some full-sized jack-in-the-box. "Good work, Rod!" cried Cracker, zooming over me with his flying pack. I didn't have time to appreciate the compliment. I had stumbled over the edge of the opening and landed on top of BKR. He looked as if he was interested in making sure I never did anything like that again as long as I lived. Mostly by making how long I lived really, really short. Grabbing my skull between his hands, which were astonishingly strong, he began to squeeze. "I don't have any bugs, Rod," he yelled, "so why don't I just squish your head instead?" The pain was incredible. "Stop!" I screamed. "Stop!" "Unhand that earthling!" roared Cracker, flying overhead and zapping Billy with his ray gun. "Ow!" cried Billy. He slapped his right hand to the side of his head where the tiny ray of light had struck him. It's hard to squeeze something between your hands when only one of them is in place. I took the chance to roll out of his grip. Billy followed with rage, but before he could grab me, the Furkel sailed in front of him. To my astonishment, an orange ray came out of the bottom and sucked Cracker into the ship. Suddenly, I realized that Madame Pong and Snout were nowhere to be seen. Had the ship pulled them in as well? I feared that they would abandon me in the hands of Billy Becker. That wasn't fair, I now realize. The aliens considered me one of them and were planning to take care of me, which is why the ship flew over and pointed the ray at me. Only now it was purple instead of orange. I couldn't figure out what they were up to. Were they going to use the tractor beam to pick me up and then fly out of here? Suddenly, I noticed that the room was getting bigger. The chairs seemed to be growing, the walls getting further away, the ceiling getting higher. The Furkel was growing too. That was when I realized nothing was growing. I was getting smaller and smaller and smaller until I was about 2 inches high. Before I could figure out what it felt like to be only 2 inches high, I heard Billy Becker cry, "A bug! I hate bugs! It's squishing time!" It wasn't until I saw his giant hand hurtling toward my head that I realized I was the bug he was shouting about. Chapter 12. A Small Problem. "Billy!" I screamed. "Don't! It's me, Rod!" Which shows you how addled I was at that point. To begin with, despite everything that had happened, I was still thinking of BKR as Billy Becker rather than as a desperate interstellar criminal. For an instant, I even thought he actually believed I was a bug. Then I realized it was just his sixth sense of humor in operation. It's amazing how much can go through your head when you see death hurtling at you. Billy's hand was inches from my head, a microsecond from turning me into a grease spot on the rug. When he screamed and twisted sideways, the Furkel had struck again. "Damn you, Cracker!" cried Billy.
What did he say?
"Damn you, Cracker!"
Oh, I thought he's.
cried Billy. He was now lying on the floor and clutching his hand. I figured this wouldn't last. He would be on his feet soon. I wanted to be far away from him by the time he was. If you've ever tried to catch a mouse or a cockroach, you know that tiny things can move pretty fast. I proved it now by moving faster than I had thought possible. Soon I was going so fast that I started to fly, which has been one of my favorite fantasies for as long as I can remember. It didn't take long to realize I wasn't flying because I was running so fast. I was flying because the ship had caught me in the orange beam it had used to suck up Cracker and the others. When I was about 2 feet above the floor, BKR roared and lunged at me. I tried to twist away, but the ray had me in its grip. I couldn't move. Fortunately, the ray was faster than Billy. He flashed underneath me as I was lifted into the ship. "Get us out of here, Phil!" Oops, wrong voice. "Get us out of here, Phil!" I heard Cracker command as the door slid shut beneath me. I felt the ship accelerate. Then suddenly we came to a full stop. "He's got us!" cried Madame Pong. "Full reverse blasters!" ordered Cracker. "Aye, aye, Captain," said a voice that I recognized as belonging to the potted plant. A roar, a scream from BKR. The ship shot forward and we hurtled through a window without breaking it, mostly because it had already been broken when the Furkel flew in. When we were free of BKR's house, Madame Pong came to stand beside me. I felt like she had gotten taller, or even though I knew the opposite was true, The fact that the ship's furniture was the right size added to the illusion. After all, it was easier to believe that the furniture was full size than to believe that at that moment I could be inside my mother's coffee cup. "Are you all right, Rod?" Madame Pong asked, a worried look creasing her yellow face. "I'm not sure." "He's probably in shock," said Tar Gibbons. The four-legged alien walked over, put an orange hand on my forehead, and stared at me with goggly eyes. My first thought was that this was no way to make me feel better. Then, oddly, I did start to feel better. "Are you casting a spell on me?" I cried, flinching away from his hand. "Don't be silly. I'm simply easing some of your tension." "How?" Madame Pong shook her head. "Don't ask. It's even more complicated than trying to explain how gender works on Tar Gibbons' planet." "T'chaw, madam," said Tar Gibbons. "It's not complicated at all. I'm working at the subatomic level to alter the electron flow affecting young Rod Albright's endocrine system and causing him feelings of fear. Nothing mystic about it. It's basic warrior science." Suddenly, a furry creature went scurrying past me, except for the fact that it was blue. It looked like a cross between a cat and a monkey. "What is that?" I cried. "Plink," said Madame Pong. I wasn't sure if the word was the name of the creature or simply a flaw in their language program. "Plink?" I asked. "He's Phil's assistant."
P-L-I-N-K.
Symbiote. Plink. "He's Phil's assistant." "Symbiote would be a better word," said Tar Gibbons, "since the two species co-evolved." Turning to me, it added, "Plink is the moving half of the partnership. He runs and fetches for Phil. In return, he gets to eat my leaves and branches and nuts that Phil is done with." Tar Gibbons must have seen the look on my face, because its eyes got bigger and it added, "Biology is strange and wonderful, and not subject to moral judgment, young Rod Albright." Before I could answer, or ask the tar why it kept calling me young Rod Albright, Plink went scooting back in the other direction. Before I could answer, or ask Tar why it kept calling me young Rod Albright, Plink went scooting back in the other direction, carrying something that looked like an interstellar version of a monkey wrench. The little animal zipped through the door and into what I took to be the cabin of the ship and stopped. I couldn't see Phil, but I did see a long green tendril unroll and lift the wrench out of Plink's paws. "Would you like a tour of the ship?" asked Madame Pong. "Yes, please," I said. "But what about BKR?" "He'll be after us soon, I imagine, but there's not much I can do about it. That's Gracker's job. I am the diplomatic officer for the ship, and right now I am offering my services." "But shouldn't we be doing something?" "Action taken without thought is like giving an egg a navel," said Tar Gibbons, blinking and waving its long neck. "Is that supposed to mean something?" I asked. "It should, unless this ding-butted language program is malfunctioning again." It turned to Madame Pong and said in a cranky voice, "Can't you do something about the quality of the equipment they give us?" Putting her hands together, she made one of her little bows. "I shall do my best," she said, quietly. Walking around behind him, she gave him a solid whack in the back of his head. "There," she said. "That ought to take care of it for the time being." "Thank you," said the tar. Reaching for my hand, Madame Pong said, "Come, Rod, let me show you the ship." Now that I was 2 inches tall, the Furkle was in perfect proportion to me, except in one case. Each of the aliens had his, her, or its own room. Madame Pong didn't show me all of them, but she did open the door to her own room, which was slightly larger than my own bedroom. Sheets of gauzy fabric in colors ranging from pale yellow to purple, so deep it was almost black, hung from her ceiling, making the room look as if it were filled with a rainbow mist. "Walk in," she said, gesturing toward the door. The fabric trailed over my skin as I entered it, tingled and tickled, as if it had been the tiniest electric current running through it. "This feels weird," I cried. She smiled. made one of her tiny bows and said simply, "I'm happy in this room." Next she showed me Phil's room, which, not surprisingly, was something like a jungle. "Phil is on a quest for his roots," said Madame Pong, in a hushed voice. "This is a holy endeavor, and we are privileged to have him with us. When he is not working, he often comes here to be alone and to turn over his new leaf." I started to laugh, then realized that I had no idea whether she was joking or serious. Since I was a guest and didn't want to offend her, I didn't ask. I just put my hands together and made a tiny bow, which seemed to please her. Because of his vows, Phil considers his room to be open to all when he's not inside it himself. The room shared by Cracker and Snout is private. However, if Tar Gibbons has no objections, we can see it. It's personal space. "That is amazingly all right," said Tar Gibbons, stretching its neck so that its head came over my shoulder, startling me a little. Tar Gibbons's room was actually a pond, with a large rock in the center. A thick mist hovered in the room, and a little squeaking sound filled the air. "Lovely, isn't it?" asked Tar Gibbons, who stood next to me at the door. Before I could answer, a small winged thing flew past me, almost faster than I could see. A hand shot forward. Grabbing the winged thing out of the air, Tar Gibbons popped the creature into its mouth. "I grow my own snacks," it said cheerfully, crunching as it spoke. "How ecological," I replied. Madame Pong was showing me the recreation room, which had wall-sized viewing screens and shape-shifting furniture, when Cracker's voice filled the air. "All crew members to the main deck at once. That includes the Earthling deputy. Emergency alert! I repeat, emergency alert!" "Oh dear," said Madame Pong. "Come along, Rod." I followed the two aliens to the elevator, which was really just a tube. The three of us crowded in, and the door closed. I heard a whoosh as the next thing I knew, we were in the ship's control room. Cracker was sitting at a console filled with lights, buttons, balls, and levers, all of them marked with labels. At least I assumed they were labels, written in a language that didn't look like anything else I had ever seen. Snout stood at his shoulder, eyes closed as if concentrating on the infinite. Across the room, Phil floated in front of a wall full of mechanical devices. The light from his main blossom was focused on a row of switches, and his leaves were waving in agitated fashion as he used several tendrils to manipulate the controls. "What is it, Cracker?" asked Madame Pong as we entered the room. It was Snout who answered. His voice was solemn. "I have been running some calculations, and I have anticipated BKR's next move." "And it is?" prompted Tar Gibbons. "He will kidnap someone from Rod's family." "This is terrible!" I cried. "We have to stop him."
Dad,
"Yes."
did you say it in Cracker's voice?
No, because it wasn't in Cracker's voice. It was Tar Gibbons. "It's worse than you can imagine." "It's worse than you can imagine," whispered Madame Pong, glancing at her. I was horrified to see that she had actually turned white. "What do you mean it's worse than I can imagine? What could be worse than BKR kidnapping someone from my family?" Tar Gibbons' eyes had sunk back into his head. The pupils were like tiny points of blackness. "We haven't yet told you the nature of BKR's crime." Chapter 13. A Big Problem. "Well, what is it?" I cried. "What is his crime?" "Cruelty," whispered Snout. I felt my stomach tighten. "Cruelty?" I asked, wondering if I had heard right. "In the civilized galaxy, cruelty is the greatest of all crimes," said Madame Pong. "Of course, life always involves some suffering, and there are times when painful things must be done for life to continue. But an intelligent being who takes pleasure in causing pain to others, well, such a being is considered dangerously bent." "You must understand," said Tar Gibbons, "that empathy is the heart of civilization." "Empathy?" "The ability to understand what another feels," said Snout. "It is the trait that lifts us above the animals." "Speak for yourself," burped Phil. "You know what I mean," said Snout smoothly. An intelligent being who lacks empathy is a threat to the social order. Not caring what pain it causes, it may do damage beyond estimation. Causing needless suffering is a sickness, and those who do so are forever outside our law. I had a sudden sinking feeling that I knew why Earth had not yet been invited to join the League of Worlds. If you've watched the evening news more than once, I'm sure I don't have to explain. Just how cruel is this guy? I asked, hoping that if cruelty was a crime, squashing bugs against the heads of innocent kids might be enough to get BKR in the kind of trouble that would send the Galactic Patrol across the galaxy to capture him. Millions have wept, murmured Madame Pong. That didn't sound good. But what has he done? I persisted. That is classified information, snapped Gracker, giving me a sudden desire to hit him on the head. Rod, if he kidnapped someone from your family, you can be sure that at least part of his motive will be to cause you pain and suffering, said Tar Gibbons. But what will he do to them? I persisted. Nothing if we can stop him in time, said Snout. Where are your mother's siblings now? They should be at home. Oh dear, said Madame Pong. I think that simple phrase was the most frightening thing I had heard yet. Back to the Albright residence, shouted Gracker. Hi, Captain Meathead, burped Phil. My stomach lurched as the ship made a sharp turn and then shot forward. Hurry, I cried. Hurry! We're there, said Gracker. How much faster do you want us to go? We're there? But we just started. Then I blushed. We were in a spaceship. The 3 miles from the Becker house to my house might have taken a quarter of an hour on my bike, but that was no reason to expect the same of good old ship Verkle. Snout, called Gracker. Do a bioscan and see if you can detect any life forms in the house, especially those of the Albright larva. Snout closed his eyes. The end of his snout began to quiver, as if he were trying to smell the twins. I detect one humanoid life form, he said, at last. Mom? I cried. No, not your mother, nor is it BKR. This is someone unfamiliar to me. I felt a little chill. Who could it be? I asked.
I think it's his dad.
We'll have to go down and find out, said. We'll have to go down and find out, said Gracker grimly. While Phil landed the Verkle in the apple tree behind the house, Gracker handed me a wide belt. Strap this on. Oh, strap this on, he said. What is it? Rocket pack, standard issue, same as I use. Basically, an anti-gravity belt with thrusters for control. Use the buttons on the front to direct yourself. Madame Pong looked worried. Gracker, do you think... Madam, he said, holding up a green hand, this is a captain's decision. Rod must accompany us, and the belt is the only efficient way for him to do so. She closed her eyes and nodded her head. Then she turned to me and said, Be careful, young one. I hadn't really been worried until she did that. Now I felt nervous indeed. Be careful of what? I asked. Of flying, of surprises, of cruelty. My thoughts will be with you. Just your thoughts? Aren't you coming along? This is a scouting mission, said Gracker. I need you because you know the territory. Tar Gibbons will accompany us in case we need his fighting skills. Snout, please perform a training transfer. Before I could ask what a training transfer was, Snout had placed his long fingers at the sides of my head. Close your eyes, Rod, he whispered, standing as close as he could without jamming his long face into mine. And whatever you do, don't move. I did as he asked. He began to hum. Suddenly, my mind was filled with an image of the control panel in the front of the rocket belt. How did you do that? I cried, pulling away from him. Instead of answering, he screamed and fell to the floor. What happened? I cried. What is it? He told you not to move, snapped Gracker, kneeling beside the fallen alien. With a gentleness that surprised me, he lifted Snout's head into his lap. But he startled me, I said weakly. Warrior mind must deal with surprise more fluidly, said Tar Gibbons, sticking his head over my shoulder. Snout had his hands crossed over his eyes. He was moaning softly. Your sudden move broke the connection that poor Snout had established, explained Madame Pong. That breaking must be done slowly and gently, otherwise much pain can ensue. I felt terrible. I'm sorry, I said, kneeling beside Snout and touching his hand. His long fingers closed over mine. The skin felt like fine leather stretched over sticks. No matter, he muttered. No matter. See to the children. Come, Earthling, said Cracker, getting to his feet. Madame Pong will take my friend to the healing table. We must move on to the task at hand. To my surprise, I saw a tear trickle down his green cheek. It left a glistening trail in its wake. I'm sorry, I said again, feeling helpless. Snout tightened his grip on my hand. You made a mistake. Forgiveness is granted. The pain will pass. It is not the pain of cruelty. Forget me. Save the children. I stood. Cracker and Tar Gibbons led me to an exit in the side of the ship. The door opened. I looked down and nearly fainted. I had climbed this old tree plenty of times, and I knew it well. I had often stood on this very branch. It was about 12 feet above the ground, but now that I was only 2 inches high, about a 13th of my normal height, I felt as if I was standing at the edge of a skyscraper. Go ahead, said Cracker. Jump! I didn't move. Jump or I'll have to push you. We have no time to waste. Cracker, wait, said Tar Gibbons. We can't be sure that the training transfer was effective, especially since... The warning came too late. Cracker had already given me a push, a small push to be sure, just enough to knock me off the branch. Screaming, I hurtled toward the ground, so far below. Chapter 14. Bonehead.
Bonehead? Is that the name?
That's the name of the chapter.
Okay, finally, there's names of the chapters.
There's been names of these chapters.
Mm-hmm.
I'd only fallen a couple of feet through it. Seemed as if I'd gone much farther. When a strange feeling forced me to grab my belt buckle. Somehow, I knew I was supposed to do something with it. The problem was, I wasn't sure what. I started poking and pushing frantically at the buckle. As I flashed past the white blossoms that covered the tree, suddenly, Tar Gibbons was next to me. The center button, it cried, stretching its long neck forward so that its face was close to mine. Push the center button. Something clicked in my brain. Instantly, my fingers found the button. I pushed it, and my fall began to slow. Soon I hung suspended, about 2 feet above the ground, though at my size, even 2 feet looked like a long way down. Then, as if a computer program had been loaded into my brain, I knew how to make the belt lift me again. Twisting a pair of buttons, I floated up to join Tar Gibbons, who was hovering a foot or so above me. It smiled, and together we flew back to where Cracker was waiting, about halfway between the ship and the low point of my fall. What happened? I asked. How come I know what to do? Snout implanted the knowledge in your head, said Tar Gibbons. However, your premature severing of your connection to him hindered your ability to access the information. That was why I had to prompt you. Giving you the first hint should have opened the gateway. I suspect that you now have full access to the information you need to control the belt. I knew the Tar was right, without knowing how I knew. Twisting the dials, I flew in a circle around them. It was wonderful. Unfortunately, I had no time to enjoy it. Okay, I said. I can handle myself. Now what do we do? We sneak inside to see what we can find out, said Cracker. That's your first job, to tell us the best way in. I thought for a moment. We can't count on any of the windows being open. They might be, but it would take us a while to check them out. There's a crack in the cellar door that might work, but we could get stuck there. I know. We can go through the pet flap in the kitchen door. Pet flap? Asked Tar Gibbons. It's a special little door.
So much force. If you're that tiny, you're gonna need a lot of force.
And you're probably right. It's a special little door that lets the dogs go in and out on its own.
Oh shoot, the dogs are gonna eat them like a toy.
Very thoughtful, said Tar Gibbons approvingly. I decided not to tell it that Mom had installed the flap more for our convenience than for Bonehead's. Lead the way, said Cracker. Tapping the controls on my flying belt, I zoomed around the corner of the house. I loved the fact that I could use the thing so smoothly, as if I'd been flying with it for years. I wondered if Snout could do a training transfer that would teach me how to play soccer without tripping over my feet. That thought flashed in, and out of my head. The thought that stayed was the question, who's in the house? Bonehead's door flap was about 6 times higher than I was now, and so thick I could barely grip it in my hands. It took all 3 of us to lift it far enough so that we could slip underneath. Gracker, who was even stronger than he looked, was able to hold it up while Tar Gibbons and I scurried through. Then he joined us. Someone was sitting at the kitchen table. Before I could see who it was, Bonehead came skidding into the room, barking and growling. Gracker, Tar Gibbons, and I flew straight up. We landed on top of one of the cupboards. We can hide here, I said, stepping behind one of Mom's vases, a flower thing that loomed above me like a monument. Gracker and Tar Gibbons joined me. Bonehead stared up where we had gone and continued to whine. "Gracious, dog, whatever is the matter with you?" asked a creaky voice. My eyes went wide with surprise as I recognized the voice. Gracker put his face next to my ear. "Who is it?" he whispered. "Mrs. Nesbit," I replied. "She's this old lady my mother helps out sometimes. I have no idea what she's doing here." Just then Little Thing 1 came running into the kitchen. "I thought Snout said the twins weren't here," I said. I spoke louder than I intended, which started Bonehead barking again. "Look again," said Tar Gibbons, stretching his neck over my shoulder. "That is not your sister." The surge of relief I had felt at seeing Little Thing 1 disappeared as I realized that Tar Gibbons was right. In fact, now that I looked more closely, I was surprised that I had been fooled for even a moment. Whatever had just run into the kitchen wasn't Linda, but some sort of sloppy copy of her. "Low-grade simulacrum," muttered Gracker. "I wonder why the old woman doesn't realize it." "Her eyesight is terrible," I replied. I happen to know this for certain because one of the things my mother sometimes did for Mrs. Nesbit was read the newspaper to her. "We need to find out what she knows," said Tar Gibbons. Mrs. Nesbit stood and shuffled over to where Bonehead stood yapping at us. "You just hush," she said, giving the dog a little slap on the top of his head. "You'll disturb the children." Bonehead whined and sank back on his haunches, but continued to stare at the top of the cabinet. How can we talk to her?" I asked. "We have to go back to the ship," said Tar Gibbons. "Huh?" "Phil can set it up from there. Don't argue. Just tell us how to get past the dog. We can't get through the flap while he's sitting there." "His biscuits are in a box on the shelf," I said. "If we drop one of them on the other side of the room, it should distract him long enough for us to get out." "Good," said Gracker. "Do it." "Me?" He's less apt to get upset with you than with either of us." "Less likely to eat you, for that matter," said Tar Gibbons calmly. I sighed. Touching the front of my belt, I floated from the cabinet down to the shelf. Bonehead started barking again. He didn't stop, even when I disappeared into the box of dog biscuits. The smell inside the box was overwhelming. The biscuits were as long as I was tall, and I wasn't sure I would be able to lift one. But as soon as I grabbed one, it seemed to become weightless. So I guess the anti-gravity function of the belt extended to anything I was holding. I floated out of the box with the dog biscuits. Bonehead's barking got louder than ever. "What is it?" cried Mrs. Nesbit. Barking and yelping, Bonehead chased me across the kitchen. I realized that he could swallow me in one bite. I wondered what it would be like to be eaten by my own dog. Mrs. Nesbit tried to grab him.
Well, first of all, you're partially jaggish, and you're going to be a big pile of poop.
And for one horrible moment, I was afraid he was going to trip her. Unfortunately, he slid around her. Yipping and howling, he followed me and the dog biscuit out of the room.
Bonehead's so cute. He is cute though.
You think so?
I mean, it does not even look like a biscuit. It looks like a tiny dog treat.
Yeah, that's what a dog biscuit is, a dog treat.
Not like a regular dog treat. No.
When I got to the dining room, I dropped the biscuit behind a chair in a spot where Bonehead could get it, but not without a little work. As he dived for the biscuit, I turned around and flew back to the kitchen, this time skimming along the ceiling. Before I knew where Mrs. Nesbit was unlikely to see me. Tar Gibbons and Cracker were waiting at the pet flap. Seconds later, we were outside again. "All right, that should do it," said Phil a few minutes later. "Give it a try." We were back in the ship, and the aliens had set up a system to make a phone call into the house, along with an amplifier that would make my voice loud enough for Mrs. Nesbit to hear me. A ringing sound came from the wall where Phil did all his work. After the first ring, I heard a shriek. It wasn't the phone. It was Plink. The little creature was clinging to Phil's main stem and peeking at him from between two leaves. Another ring, and then another. Then, "Hello? Hello, this is Rod. Is my mother there?" I had almost said. What happened to my mother? But I realized that would sound suspicious, since supposedly I had no idea that she wasn't there. "Is that you, Rod? This is Mrs. Nesbit. Dear, where are you? Your mother is out looking for you." "What?" "Well, the school called and wanted to know where you were. They said you didn't show up this morning. Are you all right, dear? Your mother was awfully worried. Anyway, she asked me to watch the twins while she went to look for you. You know I hate to do that. They make me so nervous. They're behaving quite well, thank goodness." I felt terrible. Mom must have been worried big time if she asked Mrs. Nesbit to watch the things. She was probably driving all over looking for me right now. "Has anyone else been there this morning?" I asked. "Why, yes, dear. That nice Billy Becker stopped in a while ago. Shouldn't he be in school, too? And where are you, dear? Your mother is awfully worried." "Tell her I'm fine." "Ask her if BKR left a message," whispered Madame Pong. I nodded. "Mrs. Nesbit, did Billy leave a message for me?" "Now, let me think. Oh, yes. He said to tell you that he would be waiting for you out in Seldom Seen. He said he has something that you would want." "What does that mean, Rod? And what is going on anyway? Your mother is awfully worried, dear. You're not doing anything dangerous, are you?" The only way to answer the question without lying was to ignore it altogether. "Tell Mom not to worry about me. Tell her I'll be home as soon as I can." I hung up. "Where is Seldom Seen?" asked Cracker. "It's the family name for the place I took you the first day you landed, when you tried to enlarge the ship." "How does BKR know about it?" asked Snout. He was leaning against the doorframe at the far side of the room. I was relieved to see him up and around, though that relief was short-lived, when Madame Pong exclaimed, "Snout, you should be resting." "No time for that," he said, waving his long fingers. "How does BKR know about this place, Rod?" "I took him there once." I blushed a little. "I was trying to make friends with him. I thought if I made friends with him, maybe I could get him to stop beating me up." "Nice idea," said Cracker. "Wrong bully. Phil set course for Seldom Seen." "But I don't understand," I said. "Why would Billy kidnap the twins and then tell us where he has them? What's the point?" "The point?" asked Cracker. "It's to get me, of course. He's using your siblings as bait. Naturally, he is also enjoying the fact that it is causing you a lot of mental pain. But I'm the one he wants to catch." "Seldom Seen, straight ahead," burped Phil, surprising me until I remembered how fast the Furkle could travel. "Uh-oh. Looks like trouble." "Show us," said Cracker. Phil flipped the switch. A huge view screen appeared on the wall. It showed the field. When Phil stretched out a tendril and twisted a knob, the image on the screen zoomed in on the center of the field. BKR stood there, smiling evilly. Madame Pong gasped. It took me a moment to see what had upset her. Then I spotted the twins. They were floating about 30 feet above the ground. Beneath them was an open pit with long green flames shooting out of it. BKR made a gesture as if by magic. Fiery purple words appeared in the air above him. "Cracker, surrender your ship and your crew, or else it's time for a barbecue." Chapter 15. Madame Pong Steps In.
Is that the name of the chapter? Yes.
I know, it's been a while. Activate external speakers and microphones, commanded Gracker. Aye, sir, said Phil. A pair of green tentacles writhed out from among his leaves and threw some switches.
Wait, remember that the twins are in danger? They're about to get put in lava, or a monster is about to eat them.
Oh yeah, they're about to put in fire.
Yeah. He said, command Gracker lead the ships or they get it.
Leaning close to what looked to be a microphone, Gracker snapped, BKR! Release those children immediately! BKR waved his hands. The purple words in the air above him shimmered and disappeared. The children are mine, he said, his words coming clearly through the speaker system. Surrender now, or you will be very sorry. Would he really hurt them, I asked. At least, I thought I asked it, until I realized my throat was so tight with fear that no sound had come out. I swallowed and tried again. Would he really hurt them? Of course, said Tar Gibbons. Wait, I've got an idea. Why don't we shrink him? Gracker shook his head. He will be shielded against that possibility. Okay, so we shrink the twins instead and get them away from him. Possible, but unlikely, said Snout, hobbling across the room to stand beside me. We got you away from him by shrinking you. BKR is not likely to let it happen twice. While success is not out of the question, odds are high that the attempt will result in injury to the younglings. Then what are we going to do? Gracker placed his hand over the microphone so that only we could hear him and said, We're going to surrender. We are? I cried in astonishment. We have no choice. Any sign of attack on our part in BKR will drop your siblings into that pit without a second thought. According to galactic code, such larvae must be protected. But can we count on him to keep his word? Will he really let the twins go if you surrender? It is my duty to negotiate that certainty, said Gracker. I was somewhat astonished that Gracker was so concerned about the twins' safety. Obviously, they belonged to a different legal category than sixth graders like me. Which brought up the next question. When we surrender, what will BKR do to us? Millions have wept, murmured Madame Pong. Tar Gibbons rested his head on his shoulder and said, Remember, young Rod Albright? All is not lost until all is lost. Microphone off, said Gracker. Aye, aye, burped Phil. Gracker turned to look at each of us full in the eyes. For the second or so that he was looking at me, I saw in his face a kind of sorrow. I would have expected him to be able to feel. It was in that moment that I understood what it meant for him to surrender his ship. Finally, he turned to Snout. The ship's mental officer rested one long-fingered hand on Gracker's broad shoulder and said, My sympathies, my captain. Gracker nodded gruffly and turned to his control panel. Microphone on, he commanded. Then, speaking softly, he said, BKR, hear my words. We will surrender once the children are safely on the ground. How do I know I can trust you? Asked BKR. Gracker hesitated. Spacer's oath, he said at last. Madame Pong gasped. Tar Gibbons stretched its neck to lay its head on my shoulder again. The captain is bound by that oath in a way that is hard to explain, it whispered. By law and by training, he cannot break it. I understand, I replied, thinking of my mother's chocolate cookies. Oath accepted, said BKR. Here are the terms. I will let the children down and allow them to return home unharmed. In exchange, you will land your ship by that rock. He paused and pointed to a big stone about 20 feet in front of him. All crew members will then exit and throw down their weapons. He took something from his pocket. According to my readings, there are 6 beings on the ship. Make sure you all come out. Gracker's eyes widened, his nostrils flared, and he began to grind his teeth. What's wrong? I whispered to Tar Gibbons. Gracker answered the question himself. Placing his hands over the microphone, he said, The instrument The instrument BKR used to determine the population of our ship checks animal life only. I'd bet a Fermian Snibble on it. He doesn't know Phil is here. If I hadn't taken a Spacer's oath, we could bring Plink out with us and leave Phil on the ship. What good would that do? I asked. Basic warrior science tells us it is always good to have an element of which your enemy is unaware, explained Targivens. It may prove worthless. It may save your hide. Gracker lifted his hand from the microphone. Through clenched teeth, he said, "Release the children. When they are out of danger, we will exit." I turned my attention to the view screen. BKR took something that looked like a TV remote control out of his pocket. He pushed a button, and the flame in the pit disappeared. Another button caused the twins to begin drifting slowly toward the ground. They landed about 5 feet from the side of the pit. "Now run home," said BKR. "You're a bad person," shouted Little Thing One. "I hope you poop your pants." Then she grabbed Eric's hand, and the two of them ran for the edge of the field. "All right, Gracker," said BKR. "The children are free. I will accept your surrender now." Before Gracker could move, Madame Pong stepped over to stand beside him. Slipping one hand over the microphone, she reached up to the back of her head and pulled out the module she had inserted the afternoon. The ship crashed in my room. Snout made a move to stop her, then lowered his hand as if he thought better of it. Gracker stood as though frozen. Removing another module from her pocket, Madame Pong slipped it into Gracker's skull, saying, "I hope this one functions more efficiently than the diplomatic module did." "What is it?" I asked. "Docility module," she said as a gentle smile spread over Gracker's face. He turned to her and said, "Well, the torch has passed. What are you going to do, Madame?" "I am assuming command of the ship," she replied. Her voice was like steel wrapped in velvet. "Phil, order Plink to exit with Snout. You yourself will stay on board. Be ready for action. The rest of us will exit in a moment. Gracker, tell BKR we're on the way out." With a dreamy smile, Gracker removed his hand from the microphone and said, "We will be exiting the ship momentarily." "Now, turn off the microphone," said Madame Pong. Gracker nodded and did as she told him. "I don't understand," I said. "Captain Gracker is bound by his oath," said Madame Pong. "I, however, am a diplomat. While I am also bound by the oath he has made, the restrictions on my profession are not quite so strict. After all, I make my living telling little white lies. BKR wanted 6 of us to exit, and 6 is what he'll get." "He also said he wanted all of us to exit," said Gracker. He was leaning against the control panel with a contented look on his face. I had been thinking the same thing, but didn't dare to say it. "He's getting half of what he asked for," said Madame Pong. "That's a better deal than most of us get out of life." We left the ship in single file. BKR, who looked like a 10-story building from my current size, stared down at us. He looked extra hard at Plink, who was riding on Snout's shoulder, but didn't say anything.
Which one's Plink on the front cover?
I don't think they showed Plink. Plink was that like little mouse creature. Remember? I think it came out of the plant. Plink's not on there.
What?
It was like a little mousy creature.
Oh.
Cracker's guess had been right. Our enemy didn't realize we still had one crew member on board the Ferkel. "All right, climb in here," said BKR, pointing to a plastic box at his feet. It took me a moment to recognize it. It was Little Thing One's lunch box, something she made Mom buy her after she saw me carrying my own lunchbox to school a couple of times a week. Now it looked like a small house. Well, a small yellow house with Smurfs all over it. Walking over to the box, I jumped up and grabbed the edge. With a boost from Cracker, I managed to climb in. Tumbling over the side, I landed in a pile of stale food and broken toys that Linda had been collecting. The other aliens soon joined me. I was still trying to untangle myself from the hair of severed Barbie doll head when BKR slammed down the lid. Until that moment, I had never considered how dark it would be inside a lunchbox. We might as well have been in a coal bin at midnight, until 2 circles of light suddenly appeared. "What's that?" I cried. I was so startled that I stepped backward. Naturally, I tripped over a piece of debris littering the slick floor of the lunchbox. "Ow!" I said as I landed on something sharp. "Are you all right, Rod?" asked Madame Pong. "I'm fine. I just fell on something. But what's making those lights?" "It's me," said Tar Gibbons. The lights went out, then came back on, and I realized it was a result of the tar blinking. The light was coming from its eyes. Aliens. "What the heck is this thing anyway?" I asked, picking up the object that had poked me in the side when I fell. I didn't really expect an answer. It was just one of those things you say. So I was startled when Tar Gibbons shouted, "Flibbix be honored! It's a warrior miracle!" Chapter 16. The Next Module. "What is it?" I asked again as the other aliens crowded around us. Cracker yawned. "Nothing much," he said. "Just the missing FD gizmo."
Where were we at?
"Isn't that what you need to enlarge the ship?" I cried. "Oh yes," he replied. "Not having it has caused us a great deal of trouble."
Where were we at?
We're at where when they were about to get caught, and one of the aliens said, like, "Great,
Just let me do it. I didn't really expect an answer. It was just one of those things you say. So I was startled when Tar Gibbons shouted, "Flibbix be honored! It's a warrior miracle!"
And then after that, what happened?
Because remember, he like landed on something and didn't know it poked him in the butt, and so we're trying to find out what that thing was that poked him. Okay, so Gracker said that it's the FD gizmo. And then he said, "Isn't that what you need to enlarge the ship?" I cried. "Oh yes," he replied. "Not having it has caused us a great deal of trouble." I wondered why Gracker was so calm about this, until I remembered that he still had the docility module in his head. "What's it doing in here?" I asked. Snout took the FD gizmo from my hands. "I suspect it was torn from the ship when we crashed through your window. Odds are one of your siblings found it and thought it was a toy." So Little Thing 1 had been carrying around the missing piece in her lunchbox full of toys. Dean, be still. Be still. Piece under her lunchbox full of toys all this time. It just goes to show you shouldn't ignore kids. All we have to do is enlarge the Furkle and ourselves is mount that in the proper slot on the outside of the ship, explained Tar Gibbons. "Great," I replied. "Only we're locked inside a lunchbox and the Furkle is out there. So how are we going to get into the ship? Get it onto the ship?" "Planjeet Fribble wasn't smelled with a single sniff," said Tar Gibbons, nodding the way it did whenever it had said something it considered to be particularly wise. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means discovering the FD gizmo is a starting point," said Madame Pong. "What we have to do next is find a way to get one or more of us out of this prison so we can—" Her words were interrupted by what felt like an earthquake. The floor became the wall as we tumbled sideways, landing in a jumbled heap of Legos, doll parts, and stale crackers. It took me a moment to realize what had happened. It was simple, really. BKR had picked up the box. Suddenly, the whole box began to shake. Plink screeched and grabbed me around the neck as we bounced up and down, then began slamming from side to side. Bits of toys, not to mention other aliens, were flying all around me. I felt as if I was trapped in a popcorn Popper. "What's going on?" I cried. "What is he doing?" "Shaking us," shouted Tar Gibbons as it bounced past me. "But why?" I cried, as a plastic dinosaur whizzed past my head. "Because he wants to," said Gracker. "He probably thinks it's funny." "Millions have wept," said Madame Pong. "Make that 1,000,001!" I shouted. Suddenly the shaking stopped. Once more the 6 of us lay in a heap at the current bottom of the box, which at the moment happened to be the side with the hinges. Plink clung to my neck and whimpered pitifully. A crack of light appeared at the top of the box. "Having fun?" asked BKR. Then he laughed, the same spine-chilling laugh I heard one other time, and slammed the lid shut again. A half an hour later we were back in BKR's house. We were still locked in Thing 1's lunchbox. The only reason we knew where we were was that Madame Pong had a radio connection to Phil, and he was able to see what was going on through the view screens of the Furkle. He reported to Madame Pong, who repeated it to us, word for word. "The enemy is carrying your prison in his right hand. Now he is tucking the Furkle under his left arm and heading back toward the swamp. Aha! He has a small flying vehicle hidden there. He is stowing the Furkle and the box in the back of his flying machine. Vision blocked for now. More reports later." During the silence that followed, we tucked the FD gizmo into my backpack, on the theory that it would be just as well to have it hidden in case we ever did manage to get out of our plastic prison. As I was fastening the strap that holds my pack shut, Madame Pong closed her eyes, a sign that she was getting a message from Phil, and said, "We are back at the Becker house. BKR has removed us from his flying machine. He is carrying us into the room where we had our last confrontation with him. He's looking around, as if trying to find something. Now he is leaving the room." "Good," said Tar Gibbons. "This is our chance to get out of here." "Any suggestions on how to do that?" I asked. "Yes, I have a simple suggestion, and you know what it is, don't you, Madame Pong?" Madame Pong looked at Tar Gibbons in horror. "You don't mean—" "Madame, warrior science tells us that when there is no other choice, we make the choice we must. While the thought fills me with fear and loathing, I have to say that I have to believe the Tar is right," said Snout. All of them turned toward Gracker. "Hey, whatever you guys want is fine with me," he said, spreading his hands and smiling. "What are you talking about?" I cried. Madame Pong rummaged through the pocket of her robe and took out another of the little devices I had seen her insert in the back of Gracker's head. "This," she said simply. "What is it?" She closed her eyes and swallowed hard. "It's the Berserk module." "My favorite," said Gracker happily, strolling over and turning around. "Go ahead, madame. I'm ready." Fingers trembling, Madame Pong removed the docility module from the back of Gracker's skull. Then she inserted the Berserk module. Stepping quickly away, she pointed at the side of the lunch box and cried, "Gracker! Wall! Bad! Kill Wall!" "Wall! Bad Wall!" screamed Gracker, running forward. "Bad! Die! Wall, die!" Flexing his legs, he took a mighty leap and slammed full force into the side of the lunch box. The entire box shook with the impact. "Die, Wall!" screamed Gracker, throwing himself against the plastic once more. When the Wall didn't die, or do anything else, for that matter, he snatched the Barbie head from the floor. Holding it by the hair, he swung it around his head and smashed it against the wall, screaming, "Kriya! Kriya! Bundalo!" Smash, smash, smash! Barbie was taking a beating, and the wall didn't show a single dent. Here's Gracker swinging the doll head.
What happened
He's
to him?
ugly.
What happened to him?
What happened to him? What?
He's different on the front.
just kind of a different... I mean, you just see kind of the back of him.
He looks like a monkey. And there he doesn't.
You just see the back of him.
And he's smaller.
And he looks like his chest is a little bit thicker, it looks like. I don't know. Lay down. Flinging aside the head, Gracker tore off his shirt. Foaming at the mouth, he began throwing himself against the wall again. Each time he hit it and bounced away, he would run further back, get more of a start, and try again. Soon he had a path across the center of the lunchbox and was running forward, throwing himself against the side, bouncing off, running back to the far side, and starting all over again, screaming all the while. The box began to move. Tar Gibbons and Madame Pong stood on either side of me, as if ready to protect me in case of a disaster. Snout covered his eyes and turned away. Plink ran up my side, whimpering in fear. He burrowed his face into my neck. Gracker's eyes were rolling in his head. His nostrils flared. His horns were throbbing up and down. Leaping forward, he dug his fingers into the slender crack where the top of the lunchbox closed against the bottom and began to pound his head against it, screaming, "Foolish wall! Feel the wrath of the Furkle's mighty Gracker!" "Stop him before he hurts himself!" cried Snout. "There's no stopping him now," said Madame Pong. Gracker let out a blood-curdling scream. Fingers still wedged in the crack, he swung his body through his arms and began to kick the ceiling. The box lurched forward, teetered for a moment, then fell from the table. Chapter 17. Truth or Consequences. For a heart-stopping moment, we hurtled through the air. Then we struck the floor with a crash. The box burst open and we tumbled out. "Run!" cried Madame Pong. "Krieger, Krieger, Bundalo!" bellowed Gracker, pounding his chest. "Bad wall broken! Mighty Gracker triumphs!" Then he went racing across the room, screaming and yelling. At the same moment, BKR came running into the room. As he came through the door, I realized that I was still carrying the backpack with the FD Gizmo in it. Where was the Furkle? I looked around frantically. There, on a table near the window. I started for it. BKR started for me. I was afraid he was going to grab me. But suddenly, Gracker let out another blood-curdling scream and used his rocket belt to launch himself into the air. Landing on BKR's head, he grabbed 2 of the orange spikes and began jumping up and down as hard as he could, shouting, "Booger! Booger! Booger!" "Gracker, get off!" cried BKR, swatting at his head. Gracker only growled and sank his teeth into one of the orange spikes. BKR screamed in rage. I didn't stay to watch what happened next. Manipulating the controls on my rocket belt, I flew to the table where the Furkle sat waiting. Now, all I had to do was figure out how to install the FD Gizmo. I wondered if Phil's monitors could see what I was doing this close to the ship. If he would know when the FD Gizmo was in place.
Dad, there's no jetpacks on them on the front. Look.
I know. This is a different part in the story. This is when they first got there and were eating his homework.
Yeah, homework.
Can you sit down?
Yeah.
Thank you. Even as I wondered this, the plant's voice came through the microphone in my pierced ear. "Rod, climb onto the top of the Furkle, and you will see a device almost identical to the one you carry. This is the FD Gizmo for the shrinking ray. Look at it, and you should be able to figure out how the one for the enlarger should be mounted." Behind me, a ferociously angry BKR was chasing the little aliens. I started to ask Phil why I shouldn't just fly up to the top of the ship, then realized that he was afraid I would attract BKR's attention if I did. So climb it was. Not the best choice for someone average, C- in phys ed. "Got you," said BKR. "Oh, got you," I heard BKR shout as I began to search for a way up the Furkle. Finding a foothold, I started to scramble up the side of the ship. Behind me, I heard the lunchbox lid slam shut. "This time, stay in there," shouted BKR. Who had he captured? No time to figure that out. Rod. Keep climbing. Reaching for another handhold, I missed, slipped down, lying flat on my back, gasping for breath. I wish that for once in my life I didn't have to be such a clod. Pushing myself to my feet, I started to climb again. I fell at the same spot. I was about to use the flying belt and take my chances on BKR spotting me when I remembered a day long ago when my father had taken me rock climbing. well, had tried to take me rock climbing. I had refused because I was afraid of hurting myself, but I had watched him very carefully from my spot on the ground. Now I remember how he had groped for each handhold, making sure it was solid before he went further. I started again, working carefully. This time, I made it. Scrambling over to the FD gizmo that was already in place, the one that worked with the shrinking ray, I pulled the one for the enlarger out of my backpack. I could see where it was supposed to go, and it only took a moment for me to see how I could insert it. But before I could do the job, BKR cried, "Stop right there, Rod!" I looked up. BKR was on the other side of the room. He was holding one hand behind his back, and the other hand he held a ray gun. It was pointing straight at me. This was no tiny ear-piercing size ray gun. In fact, given my own current size, it was more like a ray cannon. Despite the fact that I was currently a pretty tiny target, I figured odds were fair that a BKR was a good shot. And or B, his gun had some sort of never-miss technology. Fear trickled through my veins. "What are you up to, Rod?" asked BKR, trying to get back inside the ship. Asked BKR, "Trying to get back in the ship?" "No," I said honestly. He narrowed his eyes. Looking straight at me, he asked suspiciously, "Rod, is there still a crew member in there?" My mouth went dry. It was cookie in the throat time. "Well," he coaxed. "Come on, Rod. I know you never lie, so tell me the truth. Is there someone inside the Furkle who can operate it?" I tried to swallow but couldn't. My hands trembled. I thought of Phil. I thought of Gracker and the others. I thought of my mother weeping in the night because my father had lied to her. I thought of Little Thing 1 and Little Thing 2 hanging in the air above a pit filled with fire. Looking at BKR, I said, "Of course there's no one inside." I had done it. I had lied to him. Unfortunately, it did me no good. "I don't believe you," he cried, pulling his other hand from behind his back. He was holding Madame Pong. "Tell me who's in the ship, Rod," he said, his voice cold. He didn't need to tell me what he would do if I didn't tell him the truth. "Phil, the plant," I said without hesitation. BKR's eyes widened for a moment, and I could see he had figured out how he had been fooled. "And what is that thing you have in your hand?" he asked. "The device that will allow the ship to enlarge again," I said quietly. "I think you'd better drop it, don't you?" he asked, extending his hand that held Madame Pong and making as if to squeeze her. "Don't, Rod!" she cried. "Put it in! Put it in now!" "Make one move and I squeeze," snarled BKR. "Hard!" "Animal!" shrieked a tiny voice. It was Tar Gibbons. He came racing across the floor, its 4 legs moving so fast that they were nearly a blur. "Hee-yah! Fizzum Spezak!" cried the tiny master of the martial arts as it hurled itself against BKR's ankle. It was like a hamster attacking a St. Bernard, yet to my astonishment, BKR tottered and fell forward with a crash. The ray gun flew out of his hand and skittered across the floor. I was about to slam the FD gizmo into place when BKR raised himself to his knees. "Rod," he cried, "stop right there. I know what happened to your father. Put that down and I'll tell you." There's Tar Gibbons kicking BKR in the ankle.
Wait, can you see Tar Gibbons on the front?
He's down there.
Oh. Why are the pages black and white? But the front's not.
To frustrate you, that's why. Don't you fall asleep on me, Gracie.
I'm not.
Good. Chapter 18, Growing Pains. I felt something in my stomach, a surge of hope and fear and anger unlike anything else I had ever experienced. "You don't know where my father is," I said, my voice shaking. "Oh, yes, I do," said BKR, inching forward. I looked around for help. Tar Gibbons was lying on his side near BKR, eyes closed, legs stiff. Was it dead or merely unconscious from the force of BKR's fall? At first I couldn't see Madame Pong at all. Finally I spotted her, sprawled on the floor about 5 feet from BKR. Like Tar Gibbons, she was unconscious or worse. Gracker and Snout were nowhere to be seen. One, at least, was in the lunchbox. The other was missing. I was alone, face to face with the cruelest person in the galaxy, and he was offering me my heart's desire if I would only betray my friends. I blinked. Friends? When did I start thinking of them as friends? It didn't matter. I knew it was right. It was the right word. But it didn't change what BKR was offering me. My father. I can take you to him, whispered BKR, creeping forward. Give me that piece and I'll tell you all about it. I said nothing. He's waiting for you, Rod, said BKR. Waiting for you out there. I can take you to him, and I can show you things, Rod. I can show you the stars. I can take you where you belong. It was ridiculous. BKR couldn't possibly know where my father was. It was as impossible as what? As aliens flying through my window? As me being 2 inches tall? I shivered. Was anything really impossible? If not, then maybe BKR really did know where my father was. I thought of all the lies Mickey had told me, and how I had believed every one of them. I was so gullible, so stupid, when it came to that. Only now I understood more about lying. I had done it myself. But my father... A voice spoke in my ear. Rod, ignore him. Insert the gizmo. Some people have a conscience. I had a talking plant, but I wasn't sure if he was the best source of advice. After all, who knows how plants feel about their fathers? BKR was still on his knees. He didn't look like the cruelest being in the galaxy now, just a weird guy with blue skin and a spiky head. But I remembered the words of Madame Pong. Millions have wept. Rod, called another voice. Don't listen to him. It was Snout. He had crawled out from under a stool and was standing about 2 feet behind BKR. Why not? I shouted. I was surprised to realize that I was crying. Is he lying? I don't know, said Snout. I only know that he is cruel for the sake of being cruel. He must be stopped. Cruel for the sake of being cruel. What was the cruelest thing he could do to me? Promise me my father? Rod, cried BKR, as he saw me move my hand. Don't! It was too late. I placed the FD gizmo against the slot and pushed down. The next few moments were a blur. The Furkle shot forward, throwing me off. I hit the table hard. You fool, Albright! Cried BKR. The Furkle swooped near him. It paused, hovering, and then orange rays shot out from the bottom and stuck in bottom to suck in Madame Pong. BKR lunged for the ship, but it swung away in time. Banking to the left, it hovered over the inert form of Tar Gibbons. Again, the ray shot down, but as Tar Gibbons floated into the ship, BKR threw himself at the Furkle. He landed right on the ship. It sank toward the floor, wobbling from side to side. It struggled over to Snout and pulled him in. BKR continued trying to drive it down, looking like someone trying to hold a beach ball under the water. But while he couldn't get a grip all the way to the floor, neither could the Furkle rise high enough to pull me in from the table. Phil's voice sounded in my ear again. Rod, get out of the house as fast as you can. How? I cried. Before he could reply, I figured out the answer. On my own. The rocket belt. Touching the controls, I shot into the air. Get back here, Pudge Boy, screeched BKR as I shot over his head. But he couldn't hold on to the Furkle, and chase me at the same time. And he wanted the Furkle more, so he let me go. My problem now was, go where? How could I get out of the house? I flew to the top of the room and looked around. The windows were all closed. I was sure that was true for every room in the house, nor would there be any doors open. Then I saw it, the fireplace. I just hope the damper is open. I thought as I zoomed down over the top of the fire screen, then curved up inside the chimney. I could see blue above me. Twisting the controls, I shot straight up the chimney and into the sky. I was barely past the bricks when I heard a rumble beneath me. The Furkle was enlarging. I continued upward as Billy Becker's house exploded. Bricks, boards, and bits of glass went flying in all directions. I stared down in awe. Where there had been a house but moments before, there was now a ship, the Furkle, in its full-size glory. There's a picture.
Where were they?
They were inside the house, inside BKR's house.
After a moment, a ramp expanded from the side.
Boy, don't you be reading my stuff.
Oh, I can read if I want.
Chapter 19, Sick Bay. After a moment, a ramp extended from the side of the Furkle. Snout, now full size, stepped out and called, "Rod! Rod, where are you?" "Here!" I cried, flashing down to hover in front of him. As I floated there, I had a sense that something about the alien wasn't quite as I had expected, but I couldn't figure out what it was. "Thank goodness you're all right," he said. "Quick, fly over by that tree so Phil can enlarge you." I shot off in the direction he pointed. Almost instantly, an orange ray shot out from the top of the ship. I could see that it came from the device I had installed, which was now several times larger than me. The world spun. For an instant, I blacked out. When I opened my eyes, I was still floating about 3 feet above the ground. But now, I was my regular size. I flew back to Snout. That was when I realized what had been bothering me before. He stood only a few inches higher than my belly button. "Did the enlarger malfunction?" I asked. He flapped his snout at me. "No, this is our regular size. We don't have time to talk about that now. We have to find Gracker and BKR and get out of here. I'm bonded to Gracker, so I should be able to locate him with my mind."
What does it mean, bonded?
I don't know. But if he is unconscious, or maybe they have some kind of mental connection. He stopped and cleared his throat. "If he is unconscious, it will be more difficult. You look for BKR." I nodded and started to fly in a circle above the wreckage. Though I was looking for BKR, I spotted Gracker first, or at least the lunchbox that I thought held him. It was nearly flat. A tiny green arm hung from one side of it. My heart thudding with terror, I landed and gently picked up the box. I didn't dare open it. "Snout!" I cried. "Over here, quick!" He rushed to my side. When he saw the crushed box, the dangling arm, his eyes went wide, and he looked so sad I nearly began to cry myself. Without saying a word, he took the box tenderly from my hands. "Find BKR," he said. Then he turned and headed for the ship. It took me another 2 or 3 minutes to locate our enemy. He was lying in a pile of rubble about 50 feet from the ship. His eyes were closed and he looked badly battered. Remembering that the anti-gravity function of the belt would extend to anything I carried, I swooped down and picked him up, and sailed into the ship. "Good," said Phil when he saw me come through the door. "Now, let's get out of here before anyone sees us." He pulled in the ramp, and the Furkle soared into the atmosphere. Snout appeared at my side almost instantly. "Bring the enemy this way," he said. As I followed him from the control room, I had to duck my head to fit through the doorway. He went to an elevator, which quickly transported us to what had to be the ship's version of the nurse's office at school. Sick bay was what Snout called it. Madame Pong and Tar Gibbons were already there, each lying on a table. Above the tables hung silvery domes from which emanated a soft blue light. Like Snout, Madame Pong and Tar Gibbons appeared to be only about 3 feet tall, though it was harder to judge precisely with them lying down. Madame Pong wrinkled her nose when she saw me. "You did well, Rod," she whispered. "Thank you," I said softly, scared by the weakness in her voice. I wanted to go to her, but I had to get rid of BKR. "Place him here," said Snout, indicating another of the healing tables. When I laid BKR down, Snout strapped him to the table. Then he switched on the blue light. I went to stand beside Madame Pong. "Are you all right?" I asked. She closed her hand over mine. "I will be. Before long. These healing tables are most effective." Our main concern now is for our fallen companion, Captain Gracker," added Tar Gibbons. "Where is Gracker?" I asked. A lump wedged itself in my throat. Madame Pong made a small gesture. "Over there." I looked where she was pointing and saw Snout standing beside a fourth table. When I went to join him, he leaned his head against my elbow and sighed. The lunchbox was open now. Inside lay the motionless form of Captain Gracker. Next to him was poor, tiny Plink, no bigger than the last joint on my pinky finger. I reached toward them, then drew my hand back. As I watched, Gracker's eyes fluttered open. "Badwall!" he whispered. "Bad! Kriega!" Then he tried to struggle to his feet. Snout smiled and burst into tears. "He's going to be all right," he whispered. The aliens stayed at my house that night. They shrank the ship again, which made me kind of nervous, but Phil assured us that now that they had the missing FD Gizmo, it would be no problem to enlarge it. Things were pretty tense on the home front. Mom was furious with me for skipping school. I told her the truth. The bullying had gotten so bad that I just couldn't go that day. I just didn't say whose bullying. We were we were still arguing about it when the phone rang. My mother picked it up, and by the way her face fell, I could tell it was bad news. "Yes, Mr. Merkel," she said. "I'll talk to him this evening." Hanging up, she made a face. "That was Arnie's father. He's still talking about a lawsuit. I don't know what we're going to do. I don't know what we're going to..." She paused, turned away. When she turned back, her face was calm. "Don't worry about it, Rod," she said. I appreciated the sentiment, but not worrying about it was not one of my options. Before I could think of anything to say, the phone rang again. Mom moaned and picked up the receiver. I started to leave, but she motioned me back into the room. She listened for a minute, and if she had looked worried when Mr. Markle called, the look on her face now was of panic and disbelief. After a minute, she put her hand over the receiver and whispered, "Rod, were you near the Becker house today?" Eyes wide, I nodded. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. After a second, she said, "The police want to talk to you." The sergeant who came to the house was firm but kind. I could tell he didn't want to believe I had anything to do with the explosion. I could also tell that he was afraid it would turn out that I had. "Is it true that you skipped school today, young man?" "Yes, sir." "And did you go over to the Becker house when you should have been at school?" "Yes, sir." "Now, why would you do a thing like that?" I can hardly remember the story I concocted. Something about wanting to talk to Mrs. Becker to see if she could do anything about the way Billy was bullying me. I think it made sense, though. I couldn't swear to it. It was a good thing I had broken through my barrier about lying, because that wasn't the last whopper I had to tell before the interview was over. When the sergeant asked me if I had seen anything suspicious, I swallowed hard and lied again. So far, I thought, I was doing pretty well, but his next question really scared me. "Is it true that you've been working on a volcano for your science project?" No point in telling a lie out on that one. Everyone in my class knew what I had been making. "Yes, sir." "And it was really going to erupt?" "Yes, sir." "So you've been learning about explosives." "Now see here, officer," said my mother. He waved his hand to her to be quiet. "I was just going to use vinegar and baking soda," I said meekly. "Well, that's about it for now," he said, folding his notebook. "If you think of anything else I should know, give me a call." It was clear that by anything else, he meant if I wanted to confess to having blown up the Becker house. My mother showed him to the door. When he was gone, she came back and looked at me. "Rod, do you know anything about what happened to the Becker house?" "Yes, Mom, I do," I said. "Something you didn't tell the officer?" "Yes." "What?" I sighed. I might have been able to lie to BKR. I might have been able to lie to the police, but I still couldn't lie to her. "Well, it blew up when a miniaturized alien spaceship that was trapped inside the house expanded to its full size." "Rod, this is no laughing matter. What happened today is very serious. I think you'd better go to your room, young man. I'm very disappointed in you." The taste of dry chocolate cookie heavy in my mouth. I sighed and trudged to my room. "What's wrong, Rod?" asked Snout when he saw me come in. He was sitting on the edge of my science project. We had figured this was a good place for the aliens to hang out. Since I hadn't finished repairing the hole, if we heard anyone coming, they could scramble through it and hide everyone in the volcano.
I've been gotten a little asleep.
I don't know what to tell you. You're going to have to go back and listen later. Sit up.
I never will.
Everything I said bitterly. "You guys have completed your mission, but my life is going right into the toilet. My mother is furious at me for skipping school today, and since I was out of school when it happened, our local police think I was the one who blew up the Becker house, not to mention the fact that my science project still has a big hole in it." "I've been meaning to ask you about the project, Rod," said Phil. "How exactly were you planning to get it to school?" "In my mother's car," I said, wondering what in the world he was talking about. "And how are you going to get it in her car?" "Well, the two of us would pick it up and... I stopped as I realized what he was talking about. The volcano wasn't sturdy enough to be tipped sideways, and it was at least a foot too wide to go through the door. It was a small thing, really, but it was the last straw. With a scream of despair, I threw myself onto the bed and buried my head under the pillow. I only meant to stay there for a minute, but suddenly, everything, the lack of sleep, wild adventures, the danger and drama caught up with me. I felt myself drifting into a sleep I couldn't seem to resist. Even now, I don't know whether the sleep came from sheer exhaustion or from Snout practicing his mental arts on me. Either way, it was deep and satisfying, not nearly as satisfying as the next day, which was in a lot of ways the best day of my life, except for the part that was the worst. Chapter 20. A Visit from Mr. Becker. The first thing I saw when I woke up from my volcano sitting next... First thing I saw when I woke up was my volcano sitting next to me on my pillow. It was small enough to fit in the palm of my hand. Not only that, the hole was fixed. The entire thing had been beautifully decorated. Wow! I cried. What good is having a shrinking ray if you can't use it to help a friend? Burped Phil. He was on my nightstand, his pot floating a quarter of an inch or so above the surface. I could see Plink climbing around the inside of his branches. Who's
Plink?
That little mouse-type critter. And wait till you see it erupt, said Tar Gibbons. We've added a few special effects. This is great, I said, hoping their special effects wouldn't convince the police that I was indeed the one who had blown up the Becker place. It's no more than you have earned, said Madame Pong. Directive 479.8.4.3.9 of the Galactic Code specifies that those who assist in operations of the GP should be rewarded for their efforts, said Cracker stiffly. I was delighted to see the little guy up and around again. I carried the volcano to the car before Mom was even awake. Phil flew the Furkle and its enlarged array around to meet us. I'd suggested we take it to about 85% of original size, said Snout. That should make it easier to move around. It fit easily into the trunk. This is great, guys, I said. I don't suppose you have any advice for me on how to deal with Arnie. Madame Pong smiled. Just go to school and have a good day, Rod, she said. But
Does he need Tar Gibbons to help him, do something with time? Whatever.
Her smile grew even broader. I can almost guarantee it will be a good day, he said. And that was all I could get out of her. Oh, I can almost guarantee it will be a good day, she said. And that was all I could get out of her. So look, here's Madame Pong, Snout, and Tar Gibbons on his nightstand.
Okay, so Madame Pong, Tar Gibbons is the plant. And then Snout.
Actually, that's not Snout. Snout is... That one's Snout.
No, it's not.
Yes, that one's Snout. Phil. That one's Phil.
Dad, let me hold it. Since I'm all the way over here.
Can you hand that to him?
That's a tiny thing. That's a tiny volcano.
Yeah, they shrunk it.
Why?
So remember it was too big that he couldn't get it out the door? Sit down. Get in bed.
Which one is the mouse plant? The mouse.
It's in the branches of the mouse. I don't know if you can see in that picture or not.
Oh yeah, it's like the beetle thing.
Is it?
Let me see. Look, it has its little horn.
Oh yeah.
Let me see.
Little bug looking thing in there.
I see. But guess what? You get.
That's what you did. It's what it actually.
Mom drove me in the volcano to school. The silence in the car was deafening. She didn't speak until we were in the school parking lot. Rod, about Arnie, she started. Don't worry, I said, hoping the aliens wouldn't make a liar out of me. I'll take care of it. I had hoped for some reaction to the volcano, but when I brought it in the classroom, but people were so wound up talking about the explosion at the Becker house that they barely noticed it. About the only one who said anything was Arnie Markle. He walked over, making a point to show me a big cast on his hand, and said, "Great volcano, Albright. I can't wait to see it go off. Where's that little guy you're supposed to give me?" Before I could answer, the classroom door swung open. To my astonishment, Billy Becker's father, or, more precisely, the android Billy, had used as his fake father, walked in. "Good morning, Mr. Becker," said Miss Maloney nervously. "I was so sorry to hear about the terrible tragedy at your house yesterday afternoon. Is Billy all right?" "He's fine, Miss Maloney," said Mr. Becker. "I wonder if it would be all right if I addressed the class for a moment." She furrowed her brow, but then said, "Be my guest." "Thank you," said the android. Then it turned to face us. "I feel I must apologize to all of you for the things you have suffered at my son's hands over the last several months. He is a very troubled boy. As you know, there was an incident at our home yesterday, and it was destroyed. I have heard some speculation that Rod Albright might have been involved, both because he was out of school yesterday and because he has been making a volcano. This is total nonsense. What happened yesterday was entirely Billy's fault. Let this be a lesson to the rest of you not to play with matches." Furrowing his brow, Mr. Becker walked between the desks until he reached the one where Arnie Markle sat. Leaning over Arnie, he said, "I understand that you were good friends with Billy, that you almost idolized him." Arnie nodded, uncertain of what to say. The Mr. Becker android shook his head sadly. "You must be a very sick and troubled boy. I would suggest that you get counseling immediately. Otherwise, it is likely that you will end up in the same reform school where we have been forced to send Billy." Arnie turned white. "Furthermore," said the Mr. Becker android, turning back to the front of the room, "it should be clear that Wednesday's playground incident, the one in which this young man broke his hand, was entirely the fault of himself and my son, and that Rod Albright is completely blameless in this matter. I have already spoken to Mr. Markle and made it clear that Billy has made a statement absolving Rod of all blame. This will be filed with the police." Turning back to Arnie, he added, "Your father has dropped the lawsuit. I do not think I would want to be you this afternoon." Arnie groaned and slid down in his seat. Turning to me, Mr. Becker winked. Then he strode out of the room. That afternoon, the twins and I went out to Seldom Seen to say goodbye to the aliens. This was the bad part of the day. To my astonishment, I realized that I didn't want them to go. They were full size again, which is to say they stood slightly higher than my navel.
What's the navel?
Belly button.
That's weird.
This is fairly standard size throughout most of the galaxy. This is fairly standard size throughout most of the galaxy, Madame Pong had told me the night before. It is one reason that BKR disguised himself as a child on your planet. It was the only way to fit in among people who have this odd tendency toward giantism. I had remembered the time that Snout started to say, it could also have been something to do with his stat, and Gracker cut him off. Now I understood that he had been about to say stature. Gracker hadn't wanted me to know their actual size because he felt that it would make them vulnerable. Tar Gibbons was the first to say farewell. Stretching his neck so that it could lean its head on my shoulder, it said, "This is a sad parting for me, young Rod Albright. I honor the warrior spirit within you and wish that you could travel the stars with us." So Tar Gibbons is the one with the bunch of legs and the long neck.
The one that's doing this.
Also, the Kung Fu Panda.
"Thank you, Tar Gibbons," I said. "I have learned much from you already." I didn't add that over half of it made no sense at all. The half that did make sense was terrific. "For someone made of meat, you are a fine being," said Phil, wrapping one of his tendrils around my shoulder. So the plant is Phil. "I almost feel that you could be one of the family." "Really?" I asked in surprise. "Mostly because you're such a nut," said Phil. I still couldn't tell if he was joking or not. "Train your mind," said Snout, reaching up with his long, spindly arms to grasp my shoulder. After he had held me for a moment, he reached into the pocket of his cloak and pulled out a book. "Here, I had this computer run off a copy in your language last night." I took the book. It was titled Secrets of the Mental Masters. "I'll read it carefully," I promised. Madame Pong was next. "Rod, If it were in my power, I would grant you your heart's desire, she said softly. Do you know my heart's desire? I asked, my voice equally soft. She nodded. You want your father. My throat grew thick, but I forced out the words and asked the question I had been avoiding since yesterday. Was BKR telling the truth? Does he know where my father is? I doubt it very much, she said. You know why he said that, don't you? I nodded. To be cruel. In that much, BKR had been successful. I knew I would always wonder if he could really have told me something about my father. Even so, I didn't doubt that I had done the right thing. I think my father would have approved. Please take this, said Madame Pong, slipping a ring from her pocket. The stone is from my planet. It is of great value to my heart. I started to protest, to try to give it back to her, but she shook her head and said, It is the mark of a diplomat to accept a gift with grace. Then she bowed and went into the ship. Gracker was last. He came and stood before me, his head no higher than my armpit. He stared at me for a moment, then raised his hand and made a salute. Well done, Deputy Albright. Well done indeed. Then he boarded the ship with the others. I took the things by the hands, and we backed away. With a rumble, the Furkle lifted from the ground. An orange ray shone through one of the FD gizmos, and the ship began to shrink. Soon it was the same size it had been when it landed in my papier-mâché. Suddenly, it shot straight up. In less time than it takes to tell, it disappeared into the sky. I stared after it for a long time. Then, still holding the twins by the hands, I imitated the Furkle and headed for home. Life would be easier without the aliens around. But if I told you I wouldn't miss them, you would know that I was lying. The end.
That was good.
Yes.
Well, there are 3 more books in this series if you want to read them.
That's small.
4 books in that type, like with Rod.
But you know, this author, Bruce Coville, he has another alien series of books. I think there's 5 of them in the series. They're called like My Teacher is an Alien, My Teacher Glows in the Dark, My Teacher Flunked the Planet, and I think there's 1 or 2 more. But he likes to write alien books.